A lot of you really enjoyed the 10-minute office tour video from earlier this week, and the positivity in the comments has been overwhelming, and so I really wanted to give you something cool. This is going to be a 2-hour drive to all 4 Rooster Teeth offices that I covered in the last video. I timed it up so we're starting right as the sun is starting to go down. So this is going to be a mix of some of my favorite facts, history, and lore that I've put together watching Rooster Teeth content over the years. I'm going mostly from memory. I'm trying not to look anything up. The last 2 things of note, though, this is not an exhaustive list, and it will not be perfectly chronological because I'm going to try to cover things around where we are at certain times in the drive. 2, these stories are best heard from the original sources. Whoever it is, you should absolutely go back and listen to them. If you want to know where something is, drop it in the comments. If I don't know, someone else will definitely know. Look, I know I watched a lot of Rooster Teeth content over the years to fall asleep so many different times. So I would love if this video could get someone else like me through a restless night. This is a real drive though, and my fiance is actually in the back seat. You heard her in the last video. She is wrapped up in a big blanket with some Starbucks and playing Pokemon Go. So at this point, I'd advise you to grab a drink of your own, get comfortable, maybe throw on a game, put me in the background, and let's dive into some of my favorite Rooster Teeth history and lore. So to appropriately cover Rooster Teeth, we pretty much have to start in the mid-1990s. Michael Burns was a college student at the University of Texas at Austin. In high school, he was in a class with several other boys named Michael, so they decided to use his last name and make a fun nickname, so he went by Bernie, and that's what we know him as now. So when Bernie left Rooster Teeth, he put up a blog post on Bernie.com, which we'll talk about later, where he talked about his drive to Austin and how he drove to Austin to college in a $200 car. It's actually a funny story about that $200 car. He's told it on the podcast before that what he did was he went to some auction where a guy was selling this beat up car and said, hey, look, here's the problem. And he poured some fuel in one of the lines. Sorry, I'm not a car guy. And it just came straight through the line and poured out onto the ground. So Bernie bought it for $200, wanted to look at it and fix it up, and realized he just hadn't connected a hose. So for $200, he had a perfectly good working car, and that's the car he drove to the University of Texas to start his college career. Funny enough, he did end up selling that car for $200 later on, because he thought that would be fair. He probably learned these lessons in fairness from his parents, who he said before that his mom was a nun and his dad was a Catholic priest or on his way to become a Catholic priest. And his dad actually ended up being a scientist who worked on one of the particle accelerators in Texas. I think it was in Houston at the time. Bernie goes to college. He goes through a lot of college experiences, a lot that you probably remember, such as running out onto the field at the UT Oklahoma game. We still need footage of that. Played a lot of pranks. Everyone knows the cow counting story, where he pranked his friend by calling into a radio show and telling them that his friend had this really bizarre job where he counted cows, because that was sort of what he did, and he ended up getting on a reality show, but you've heard that story enough times. So Bernie's actually talked more recently on the Morning Somewhere podcast about things he was doing in college and some bizarre sport he was playing with his friends. But I want to shift and pause on Bernie and start talking about Jeff Ramsey, who at the time was Jeffrey Fink, and he grew up in Alabama, and really a lot of places. Jacksonville. He talked a lot about living in Alabama and just feeling the crushing weight of Alabama and just thinking there had to be more to life than what he was doing. He went through high school. He's told a lot of funny stories of how he was fired from a beauty parlor where his job was to just sweep up the hair that was cut. But he would gossip with the old women too much, and he was eventually fired from that job, which parlayed him into a job at a chicken restaurant where he really wanted to work the front counter, and they always kept him in the back, and they finally tried him out one time at the front counter for a little bit. He was actually told at that job he had to go back and work in the back again because the customers found him off-putting. He said that he probably was pretty testy and probably would push some boundaries while he was up there, so it kind of makes sense. He has also talked about a really formative 2 jobs. One was this job where he worked at a kind of like a handyman almost, but a very, very technical handyman who would try to put parts together for these machines. Someone would like come in with a lawnmower and say, my lawnmower's broken, and the guy would fix it. And Jeff talked about how the guy would just be really intuitive, or the guy was really intuitive, and he would just figure it out. And there was just this idea that was instilled in Jeff that you just had to figure it out. I think that's a lesson that a lot of us have learned, that sometimes we're presented with a problem and the only way through is to fix it. So that was really formative. And then he talked about another job that just sounds so cool. I'm sure most of us who are around my age and they're like mid-30s think that they wish they would have worked at a video store. And he worked at a video store for a while, and I think he said New Jersey. Worked at this video store, and it was just the best job. He talked about how it was the coolest job. It's his favorite job that he's ever had. He got to trade videos with the pizza place next door, and you should really go listen to that on the RWBY podcast. He really does a great job of explaining how fun the job was and how it was such a unique experience for him. He wanted to get out of Alabama, so he joins the Army, goes off to become an Army man, specifically a photographer. We'll pause on Jeff and we'll move to Gus. So Gus was growing up in Eagle Pass, Texas. He was born in Austin, lived a few years in Austin, but really grew up in Eagle Pass, actually not too far from Becca Frazier, the voice of Sister from Red vs. Blue, if you remember her. She's an interior decorator now, or an interior designer, which is even cooler. Gus grows up in Eagle Pass, and they've never really talked about it, but he had a very similar outlook to Jeff, that he was in this town where he felt so far removed from everything. There was just really nowhere to go. It was so isolated, and his town felt so far behind where things were, which is really interesting too, because, and I just realized I've been calling him Gus. He's said a few times that he wants to be called Gustavo. He really likes that name. He said he's okay with fans who have known him for a while calling him Gus, but it was a change that he kind of wanted to see in the audience. So I hope if for some reason he's ever accidentally watching this video, I'm going to switch and really try to keep that the same the rest of the video. So Gustavo tells a really funny story on the Good Morning Gustavo podcast and the RWBY podcast, where he went to math camp, and I think it was in San Marcos at Texas State University. He needed to use the computer for something, needed to search something up, and he looks on the computer and it's actually connected to the internet, and he sees it and it's very slow. It's trying to load some of these images, and he turns to the professor who's kind of presiding over the math camp and says, "This is stupid. This is never going to take off. This is dumb." Don't worry, he said on the podcast he realized that was such a stupid thing to say, but I know when I was 16 I thought I knew everything in the world. I probably thought that when I was 25. My old comments on the Rooster Teeth website probably reflect that, so I'm glad that old website's gone. But he's told that story, but he's also said that he figured out at a certain point that he could use the internet because I think his mom had some sort of connection where he was able to go to a business and download things from the internet. So when his friends needed to write a paper in school, he would go on the internet and print things out for them and sell it. So Gus was pretty enterprising. We know these guys were way ahead of the curve on a lot of things, so he made up for it. So Gustavo actually then goes to Rice, which they say is the Harvard of the Southwest. He realizes that the internet is changing things, and he starts to kind of figure out that this internet thing is going to be huge, and if he wants to capitalize on it, he needs to capitalize on it now. So he looks around and says, what is the most internet cool tech place around me? Austin. So he packs up his car and moves to Austin. We're going to pause on Gus now. So Bernie at this point is majoring in computer science. I think the joke is that he got a Bachelor of Arts in computer science, but he wanted to make a movie. He was involved in this thing called TSTV, which was the broadcasting sort of organization or club at the University of Texas, and they would put on news broadcasts. They'd cover the university's sporting events. You might have even seen this clip. Bernie actually got to interview Adam Sandler right at the front of Billy Madison, right when that was coming out, and he got into this fun little back and forth with Adam Sandler, where you actually see Matt Hullum, who we're going to talk about soon, pop up. And that's where he was really getting his feet wet with the broadcasting and the producing and the filmmaking. But he wanted to make a movie, so he actually posted a flyer saying that I want to learn how to make a movie, and a few people responded, and one of those people were Matt Hullum. That's when he decided to make his movie called The Schedule. Now, it's hard for me to talk about The Schedule because this is one of my white whales of Rooster Teeth lore. I've always wanted to see The Schedule. I'm sure it's terrible. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why I actually don't want to see it, but boy, do I want to see it. The premise that Bernie has explained so far is basically it starred one of their friends named Sean Dugan, kind of how in the Tim Allen film Santa Claus dies and Tim Allen takes over Santa Claus. Sean Dugan takes over the role of Death. And we haven't gotten too much more than that, but there is a trailer that they showed at a convention that's somewhere online, and I'll probably show a few clips here. But the issue is there's some licensed music that wasn't licensed properly, but they put this movie together over several years, and when I say they, it's Joel Heyman, Matt Hullum, and Bernie. There might have been some other people involved, but those are the three people that I'm fairly confident were mainly a part of it that we know now. They spend years marketing this movie. This is going to be huge. Bernie said that they got some of the nicest rejection letters from all of the film festivals all over the world. And one of the places they debuted it was the now closed Dolby Theater in Austin, and how the theater was just a nightmare. They got these few hundred people into the theater, nothing went right, and things weren't connected, and the kids running the projector didn't do a good job, and the whole thing was this nightmare that they had spent years putting together. They did it all on credit cards, which is a real Clerks style story, which unfortunately doesn't have the ending of Clerks, but has an ending that I think we all appreciate. So Bernie said he spent several years trying to market this movie and get it out there, but it just didn't work. I imagine, based on Bernie's track record, that he had a lot of faith in the idea, because Bernie has some very unique ideas that he comes out with, and a lot of ideas that I don't see anywhere else, or I see in very few places executed poorly. So that's kind of why I would love to see the schedule, to see the good idea that was in there, despite probably a lot of amateur production issues that are still way above my head. So Bernie graduates and he starts working at this tech company, which is really kind of a call center for ISPs, or internet service providers. It was called at the time Telenetwork, and then it changed to, I think, One Support at one point, but I'll probably refer to it as Telenetwork. He quickly rises through the ranks and becomes the vice president, or one of the vice presidents of Telenetwork. At this point, we're going to shift back to Jeff. So Jeff went through the war. He was in Kuwait, and he ends up getting stationed in Fort Hood, which is now called Fort Cavazos, which is about an hour 15 minutes north of Austin. So he's in Fort Hood. There's nothing to do up in Fort Hood. If you're ever up there, it's miserable. Jeff has said as much. He said there's nothing really there to do except to take an 18-year-old in the Army's money. So Jeff would essentially drive down to Austin. He would come down to Austin and he would hit Stars Cafe, which was a diner. Then he would go see music shows. He'd go see punk shows. He went to a place called Emo's in the 90s and several other venues, but he saw so many bands, like, before they were huge. He talks about seeing Blink 182 when they were just called Blink at Emo's. Any big band in the early 2000s that is famous now, he saw. This time in Austin in the 90s really imprinted on him, and he kept it with him. And after his military service, he ended up back in New Jersey, and he talked about how he was there, he wasn't in a great space, and he was like, well, if I can move, why don't I move to Austin? So he picked up, got in the car, and drove to Austin, and he stopped on this road called William Cannon, which is in South Austin, and he drove to the first apartment, talked to the first person at the first apartment. They had a vacancy, and that's where he started to live. As someone who lives in Austin, there's something so cool to me about Jeff's story of being in Austin, feeling the gravity of it, leaving, and then just wanting to be pulled back and wanting to come back to Austin just because he loved it so much. So he comes back and he has a great story about how he was looking for jobs, and one of the jobs he looked for was a door-to-door salesman job. And the door-to-door salesman job, he had to memorize a script, and he figured out pretty quickly that it was a Ponzi scheme. It was this ridiculous thing where they were going to take money from you and they were forcing him to deliver this speech, and he had memorized the speech. He was good at the speech, but he just figured out in the middle of it, like, this isn't for me. I don't really want this. This is not the kind of job I moved to Austin to get. And he says this to the quote-unquote boss that's running the whole thing. Everyone who was there interviewing for this job ends up leaving with him, and they all end up going to get pizza. And he said he never saw any of those people again, but it was a big moment for him because he just knew he was better than that. He was meant for more than that. And that's how he ended up at Telenetwork with Bernie. And while he's at Telenetwork, he gets the job because he had actually PA'd at View Askew. He's talking to the guy who's being interviewed, and he says he's into movies, he's into Star Wars. So the guy who's interviewing him says, well, hey, Bernie, one of our guys, loves movies. He made a movie. You guys would get along great. So they hire him on, and he starts soaring through the ranks at Telenetwork. This is actually when Gus is at Telenetwork, and Gus is a floor manager. I think he's like the first level above the normal employees. And Gus is at this call center, and he starts noticing that Jeff has these really short call times, because when you're at a call center, you want people who take in customer complaints and solve them relatively quickly. So they're noticing Jeff's times are so good, like extremely good. And they even think that he's hanging up on people, or he's cutting calls short or not helping people just because his times are inexplicably short. But they start looking into his calls, and Gustavo realizes, like, wait, hey, this guy is actually the real deal. But he's under one of these other supervisors. So Gus, while playing basketball with this other supervisor one day, says, hey, why don't you trade Jeff to me? I'll take Jeff, you take this other guy, because he knows they need to promote Jeff or they're going to lose it. So he brings over Jeff, and that's kind of how that friendship blossoms. One of my other little favorite things about this call center time is that they bring in, I think it was the video game Street Fighter. It's a time a lot of us probably remember too, where it was kind of weird to be good at video games, especially as someone in your late 20s. Bernie plays Gus in Street Fighter and beats him pretty quick. He kind of apologizes for it and says, hey, sorry, I'm pretty good at video games. Now, Gus was holding back because he's playing his boss. He didn't want to be, the nerdy guy who plays video games. So Gus says, okay, you want that? So Gus then perfects Bernie, which is where you beat someone so bad they don't even get a hit on you. And then Gus just goes, yeah, I'm pretty good at video games too. And then right there, that's the end. And going back to Jeff was applying for a home loan because of his VA benefits. And Bernie had to approve it as his boss, and was looking over the loan application and saw that, hey, this guy, this young guy is affording a house, and he's going to buy a house. I gotta meet this guy. So he meets Jeff, and then they all become friends. I realize now that we're coming up pretty fast on the first office in Buda, so I'm going to skip a few things, but maybe we'll come back and cover them in a later video. Gus and Jeff agree, they shake hands, we are going to be famous on the internet one day, and in that effort, they create a website called Drunk Gamers, where they're going to review video games, they're going to drink a lot of Lone Star, and that's going to be what they do. That's going to be how they make it big on the internet. They do one thing that I really like called drunk sailing, where they get drunk and they go to, and I don't know if they were really drunk, but they would go to garage sales. And after these garage sales, they would do reviews of what they got. They were trying to find video games because they were young, broke in Austin, trying to just find any way they could to play video games. Bernie got involved with this website. You can go back through the Internet Archive and find a lot of people who contributed to the website. You can find a lot of articles. So while the site's getting big, Bernie comes up with this idea to do a parody on the Apple Switch ads that were happening at the time, where they were trying to get people to switch to using Apple computers. And the whole bit of it is that Gus is a guy who's switch to Apple computers, and he's trying to get people to switch, but basically the whole thing is that Macs are terrible at running games, and they only have 3 or 4 games. It's a really funny ad. You should definitely go watch it. It still holds up today. Maybe if you didn't see those Apple Switch ads, maybe you should go watch one of those and then watch that. But very popular at the time. It made the rounds on the internet. It got pretty big, and Bernie actually tells a story where Matt Hullum had moved to California, and they had a guy at their office who was kind of a slacker who would always be watching internet videos, and Matt comes up to this guy at his office in California and sees him watching this video of Gus, and he says, hey, how do you know Gus? And the guy's like, what are you talking about? Who's Gus? I'm just watching a video I saw on the internet. Matt's watching it, and he recognizes Gus as one of Bernie's friends and sees the skit and sees that it's kind of something Bernie would write. He immediately calls Bernie and says, hey, I just think I found this thing you made. And they describe it as the moment where the world became really flat for them, and they saw that content on the internet would spread so fast that you could make something one day and your best friend would see it within a day randomly without you even sending it to them. So they make this Apple Switch parody. It starts making the rounds on the internet. It gets pretty big. And then Gustavo and Jeff, for a potentially controversial reason, but they say it wasn't, they shut down Drunk Gamers. And they do it, they say, as a joke. Other people say it was a very serious thing and that they got angry and just decided to shut down the website. Either way, the website was shut down, but then the magazine Computer Gaming World reaches out to them and says, hey, we want to feature your Apple Switch parody in a demo disc. And at the time, these magazines would put out these demo discs with their magazine where people could play demos of games that were coming out. And there was some fun bonus content on it. And on this demo disc, they wanted to include the bonus content of the Apple Switch parody. The problem is they all still want to make something on the internet, but now there's nowhere to point people if they like the Apple Switch ad. What else are they supposed to see? So Bernie had already had this idea for a show using Halo about the characters outside of the campaign in the multiplayer game, and he called it Red vs. Blue. And he had shot a trailer, he showed it to some friends, and they didn't really get it when he explained it to them, but when he showed them the trailer, they totally understood. They immediately said, this is it, I understand it now. And in the effort of promoting this new thing, he created redversusblue.com. So you can actually go back and see in the old Apple Switch parody on YouTube, it says, at the end of the skit, drunkgamers.com, because they wanted you to go to drunkgamers.com to get more information. But I was actually able to find a copy of this demo disc and the copy of Computer Gaming World, and at the end of the video it actually shows redversusblue.com, maybe the very first piece of viral marketing for Red vs. Blue. So at this point, Bernie starts writing Red vs. Blue, and that's when he has Gus and Jeff sit down to record the first lines of Red vs. Blue. Everyone knows what they are. Hey, yeah, you ever wonder why we're here? It's one of life's great mysteries, isn't it? You know the rest. But there's this great video, and man, there's this awesome moment in the video where Bernie is recording them saying it, and they're uncomfortable to be on camera. It's kind of weird. It's 2002, early 2003 when they're filming this. They would say it wasn't a part of the agreement to be on camera, and they ask him why he's filming it, and Bernie says, well, you never know, right? This could become a thing, and this would be a really cool piece of history. And man, I don't think enough people have seen that video because it's so fascinating. Because yeah, they didn't know, these guys in the late 20s are all screwing around, not knowing that they're going to do something that is going to define the internet and their lives for the next 20 years at least. So fast forward, they end up putting the first few episodes of Red vs. Blue out, and it's doing really well. Then someone at Bungie, the company behind Halo, shares it, and then it explodes. And overnight, they become this gigantic success, and they are just trying to keep up with the rhythm of what they've started. The whole series was supposed to be one season. And a lot of times when you look back at the media at the time, Bernie calls it a movie. He calls it the movie. And really the first season, I think, is around an hour 20, which is almost feature length. So that was the whole thing. It was supposed to be an encapsulated story. But their work process during this is crazy. They're also working at the call center. And what happens is they go to work on Thursday. They work all day Thursday through the end of their shift. Then they drive from Austin all the way down to Buda, which takes about, probably at the time, 15-20 minutes based on what traffic was and how it wasn't as populated. They drive to Bernie's house down in Buda. They record the episode. They edit the episode. They're up all night. Cords for the controllers are tangled up. They're eating snacks. They're trying to stay awake. And then they wrap the episode, post it, and then they get in their cars and then drive to work. I mean, I can't imagine that level of work that they were putting in. They actually talk about on the Drunk Tank one time that the hardest part was actually Thursday going into it, when you would show up to work on Thursday knowing that the next 24 hours were going to be miserable. But it was miserable in a way, right? Because it was this really exciting thing that was gaining so much traction and they were becoming huge, but they didn't even know what the limit of it was. Not to mention, at the time, you had to host your own video. So they're racking up bills hosting the video for Red vs. Blue that thousands and thousands of people are downloading, but they don't have a way to make money off of it yet. So that's where they came up with the sponsor model, where people could pay money in advance for a DVD in the future to support the project, which was unheard of at the time, as far as I know, and a really forward-thinking way to support the project they're making. In fact, they talk about in these early days, they found a guy who had tipped them or sponsored them. It was something like $5,000 or $10,000 out of nowhere, and they couldn't believe it. And they sat down and they called the guy, or they emailed him, and he said, look, you know, if I added up all the time and all the money I would have spent on beers, hanging out with my friends, that I spent watching Red vs. Blue, you guys are still making way less than what I should probably pay you. Boy, that kind of support is really the story of Rooster Teeth, I think, in community support and a devoted community, even a small devoted community, what it can do to a project. One of these people who wanted a sponsorship was none other than Gavin Free. He was living in the United Kingdom. He was a teenager. He talks about in a lot of different places how he was in school. He had a substitute teacher, so they were kind of screwing around, and a kid named, I think his name was Johnny Ferry, showed him Red vs. Blue, and he was immediately hooked. He actually lied to Gus. He said that I think his parents had died and he needed a sponsorship for the website because he had no money, and Gus immediately called him out on his lie, and Gavin admitted it, and he ended up becoming a sponsor, and that's how Gavin started getting kind of into the loop. But Red vs. Blue takes off to such a degree that they're like, well, we got to make a DVD. So they have this amazing story where they've made the DVD, they sat down, they packaged it all in season 1 onto a DVD. They're all standing around staring at this DVD, and it's just the DVD. It has like chapter select, play, and that's it. And they all sit there and they go, hey, I think we need special features on this DVD. And all of them kind of groaned, and they were all upset. But it's this really interesting idea that you see a lot, especially in the early days, of a lot of people with momentum moving in the same direction, and the power that comes behind that. And they all realize, like, yeah, we do need to put more on this DVD. So they create these, they start with this DVD, what becomes a tradition for all of their DVDs, of just having a ton of extra content and bonus features and secret messages that if you type certain things on the remote, it will play special scenes or special deleted scenes. If you leave one of the pages up for a long time, it will just start playing a new animation. They dump all this in there. And not only that, they then have to code the DVD to make sure it fits and works on all DVD players. So this is hundreds and hundreds of hours that they're dumping into this DVD. They ship it out, it's mass produced, sent back to them. Then they had their first mailer stuffing party where they stuffed, I think it was 200 or maybe even 2,000 DVDs, which was the first run of DVDs that they sent out. And I think it was either Jeff or Gustavo who said every single one of these we packed. It was like, wow, so this person paid money to get this DVD. Like, this is insane. And boy, I can tell you guys, just from every single view I get from one of you, or every comment that I see where someone says that they say that they're binging my videos, my God, every single one of them I get is so motivating. It makes me just want to make more and give you more. So I completely think I, on a very small level, understand where they were coming from. They put out these DVDs and they sent them out. There's a cool way where you can tell if you got one of the first ever DVDs, because I happened upon one in a Goodwill in New York City, and I got a DVD and it was Red vs. Blue Season 1, and I was super excited, and I didn't know if it was an original one or not. We'll talk more about RTX later, but I approached Bernie and I showed him the DVD and he said, wow, this is one of our first DVDs. It might be even our first. Let me show you how to tell. So the first way is at the top of the DVD cover, it says Special Edition. I thought it would be funny to put Special Edition on the DVD because it was their first DVD, so it was technically the special one. Right? But then he opened it up and showed me the disc, and he said despite the hundreds and thousands of hours that went into making the DVD, they actually missed that they had misspelled trademark as tradmark. So those two things are how you know you're getting one of the first ever DVDs that they sent out, and one of the ones that they packaged themselves. It's one of my prized possessions. I've gotten it signed so far by Bernie, Matt, Gus, and Jeff. I had a plan for a while to actually get it signed by every single voice actor that was on the DVD, but I hit a few roadblocks there, and maybe I'll talk about that at another time. But they send out these DVDs, they start going to conventions, and all of a sudden things start to balloon. They're contacted by these guys at the Machinima Academy of Arts and Science, where they're told that, hey, what you're doing is something that's already been done by other people. It's not this unique idea that you have, but it's very niche, and come join us, which was a big eye-opening moment for them. So they start working with the Machinima Academy of Arts and Science. Red vs. Blue is doing well, but they know they want to make something else, the next thing. And that is the very famous sophomore production, which was The Strangerhood. And The Strangerhood was like Red vs. Blue, made in a video game. It was made in The Sims, and it's a little rough around the edges if you ever try to go back and watch it. Understandably, didn't get a season 2 for quite a while until a few people hyped it up and wanted it to come back about a decade later. They went on to make a few other shows, smaller shows like Panics and 1-800-MAGIC, a bunch of little things, but what a lot of people don't know is they eventually started getting hit up by these video game companies, and really companies in general, who were like, we need you to make a commercial for us, or we need you to make content in a video game for us. So they're out of Bernie's house at this point, and they have moved their operation into this little apartment on the second floor of this little shopping center in Buda, Texas. You might have seen it in the last video. It's this tiny little town, and it's so fascinating, and they've talked about it a lot, where they would go to these conventions and thousands of people would know them, and they're in the New York Times, and they feel larger than life, but then they come back home to Buda and they're just these guys who work upstairs doing something on the internet. It must have been so surreal for them. But this is where their work ethic really showed through, that, like I was talking about earlier, people moving in the same direction towards the same goal being such a powerful thing. Gus talked about how when they moved in, they were so excited because they had a couch, which meant they could sleep on the couch so they wouldn't have to drive all the way home to get some sleep, so they could keep working. Not because they were being forced to, but because they just wanted to keep making things to put on the internet because people liked what they were making. And wow, that's such a powerful feeling and a powerful statement that a lot of people I think today would find very toxic. And of course, in a lot of work environments, and even they say they were working far too much, but that feeling of not wanting to let the guy next to you down and you want to keep pushing towards a common goal, it's really intoxicating. And if you've never been a part of it, it really can push you over a lot of humps that you wouldn't normally go over. So they're at the office in Buda that you just saw. They're cranking out content. This is where they start the ads. And now I have to tell my favorite story. And I'm sorry, I know you heard it on the Rooster Teeth Office video, but the video game series Madden for the football video games has them make a video to show off their new tackling system. Now, I saw these commercials all the time when I was a kid because I was really into football. I played a lot in high school and I played a little in college. So I was really dialed into the Madden games. And I had no idea that they were the people behind these trailers. That's so cool. But they needed to show off Madden's new tackling system. And it was a tackling system where two players would tackle one guy. And it was a really cool looking thing at the time. And they needed somebody to test it on. So the NFL said, hey, use Dallas Clark, who was a tight end for the Colts. So they have him and he's hit really hard by two people. And the voice actors on the commercial are like, ooh, ah. And Dallas Clark is in a press conference after it comes out. And they ask him about that hit being on the commercial. And he says, yeah, my mom called me and she said it looked like you died on television. It was so so awful. And he wasn't outright disparaging the commercial, but he kind of said it made him look like a wimp. So the guys at Rooster Teeth said, hey, this is our opportunity. We're funny. We're clever. We're going to make a send up to Dallas Clark. They make this little video which features Dallas Clark first catching a pass, which is a normal thing a tight end does, and scoring a touchdown. Then later you see someone throwing the ball to Dallas Clark, and then you look at who's throwing the ball, and it's actually Dallas Clark, who threw the ball to Dallas Clark, who then scored the touchdown. Then later you see he actually gets tackled on a play, and they're like, wow, how could this have happened? And they zoom in and they see that they've made Dallas Clark on the other team to actually tackle Dallas Clark. So they say, oh, he's so good, he cloned himself to be tackled just so he could know what it was like to be tackled for once. And they put up this little splash screen that says Dallas Clark is awesome. If you were a fan of the games at the time, and maybe even now, it's so funny and it's so creative. It's one of my favorite videos that Rooster Teeth has ever put out. It actually got them fired by EA Sports. The NFL Players Association said, nope, we don't like these guys, we don't like that, that's not funny, and they fired them, which is super disappointing because that viral clip that they made got way bigger than the trailer. But hey, what are you gonna do? So also at the Buda office, they started the RT Comics, which was written and illustrated by Griffin Ramsey, Jeff's wife at the time, and Luke McKay. Now, this is a sore subject for me because I had all 5 volumes of the Rooster Teeth comics, but my car was stolen a few months ago, and I was actually in between jobs, and I kept my Rooster Teeth comics in my office with me. So I was moving them from one job to my new job, and they were just sitting in my trunk. The guy stole my car, ended up taking them, and I never ended up getting them back. I found the car, but we never got the actual RT Comics back. So I really hope someone out there is enjoying my RT Comics that maybe he sold on eBay, and I really hope he didn't just throw in a dumpster. And what's actually really fun too is you can find, I think it's on the back of the first book, a drawing of the 3D office, that first office we just went to, and you can line it up with footage, and you can tell it's the office that they were at, which is a ton of fun. And they made a bunch of Red vs. Blue there. They made a bunch of other secondary projects, but the big things to come out were Red vs. Blue and the RT Comics, and that's where I'm pretty sure Gavin started helping them out a lot. I don't think he was there at Bernie's house, but I think that it was at the Buda office where Gavin started coming over and helping out with the production of Red vs. Blue. This is my favorite office of theirs kind of in my head because I never got to see really any footage from there. There's some videos of it, especially in the Rooster Teeth documentary, where you see a few clips and a few little pieces of like video where they're making stuff. But all of them have talked about that this was the office where it really felt intimate and small and this like really special thing that they were making. And the way they talk about it just makes it seem so fascinating, and it really makes me wish I could have been a fly on the wall of watching what was happening. But of course, it was time for them to move up to Congress, which is where we are heading right now, the Congress office in downtown Austin. Jason Saldana, the voice of Tucker, actually found this office on Craigslist. So that's pretty interesting. It was originally the second floor of a Wendy's, but now was an unused second floor of a pita pit. They talked about when they moved in, the whole thing was mostly bathrooms, and they had to actually clear out a whole bunch of bathrooms. One of the bathrooms actually ended up even being the sound booth. And it's so funny to listen to them now talk about how bad of a decision it was because it had basically no room for growth. It was a decent size, but it was downtown. There were city buses. There was a ton of noise coming in off the street. It really kind of created a nightmare situation for them, which makes me realize now I didn't mention the train. They, of course, as you've seen, there was a train that ran right in front of their Buda apartment that would have to signal at the crossing every single time it crossed, and it would cross several times a day. So they were constantly just having to pause to listen to the loud roar of the train come by, and they said it would actually shake the whole office. And in the Rooster Teeth documentary, there's actually a moment where they film it where they have to pause and you hear everything shaking in their room where they're waiting for the train to pass. So back to the Congress office, this is where things kind of started to balloon. Achievement Hunter had its roots here. It was a place where they started the Drunk Tank podcast, which is where I jumped on as a fan. And this is also where they started the shorts, the RT shorts, because they got access to the Red camera. And this is a really cool office location, and I love the history behind it because this is when they were probably the most accessible at the level of how well they were known. you used to be able to just show up and they would kind of give you a little tour. And they weren't really happy about it every time, but they'd give you a tour of the office, and it was still a small enough thing to where it kind of worked. They even had a summer where they would have these community lunches where they would just say, hey, we're going to have lunch at, the Roaring Fork on 7th and Congress. Just join us there if you want to eat with us. They said sometimes a few people would show up, sometimes 20 people would show up, and they would just have lunch with the fans and hang out. As clearly someone who's a pretty big fan of Rooster Teeth, I don't know how many people could make a 2-hour-long video just talking about Rooster Teeth. I clearly would love that kind of thing, but they hit a critical mass and they took off. This is a period of Rooster Teeth that's really unique to me because I wasn't super a part of it, and I really wish I was at that point when they were on this huge upswing. They added more employees here. I mean, you probably remember old names like Marshall and Nathan, and I think even Brandon came on for a little bit here. Carrie was there for a little bit. Gavin was in his first short, which is the Secret Door short, one of my favorite shorts that they ever did. A really cool thing that they've mentioned on the Anima podcast is that they came up with an idea when they were at this office for a show called Advertism, where they would make an ad, they would shoot an entire commercial for like Ford, for example, the vehicle company, shoot this amazing commercial and send it to Ford and just invoice Ford and say, hey, you owe us this much money for the commercial. Apparently it became a really big thing. They casted for it, they did interviews, but it just never took off. But for part of this, they wanted this mural for a scene where they would kind of portray this corporate environment, and that's actually the blue mural you see along the side of the wall in this office and in the future offices. It was literally made by this company in Austin, and they asked them to make it this very oppressive, sort of if the United States was a communist nation in the 50s and 60s, to have this very suppressed worker vibe. And it's so funny with that context. And what's even funnier is the mural ended up at the newest office in the break room. And of course, this is 15 years later, and none of the new employees have any of the context of why this is there. So they're seeing this essentially communist heavy worker propaganda in their break room, and they have no idea why, and they all hate it. Fun fact about that too, Gavin ended up making sure that was secured in his storage with a bunch of other really cool Rooster Teeth items. So that mural is still secure and safe thanks to Gavin. So the shorts in there started with the Captain Dynamic shorts with Ed from the Bare Naked Ladies. He reached out to them and said he was a Rooster Teeth fan. He was a fan of Red vs. Blue. They kind of made things work. And of course, you know that Rooster Teeth made a few music videos for the Bare Naked Ladies. And it was just a really cool fan crossover. And the Bare Naked Ladies, if you don't know, at a lot of their concerts, they would actually play footage from Red vs. Blue. And the guys at Rooster Teeth would actually shoot specific little Red vs. Blue clips for them to play at their concerts, which, man, I never got to see any, but that would have been so awesome. So this was a period too where Bernie and the guys talk about how they had a lot of people start to work for them and then they would take off and do something else. The first real Rooster Teeth short is Shannon in this short where they put him in an icebox and send him to the future. Very soon after that, he ended up being in Les Miserables, and then he was a little part in Breaking Bad. And I say a little part, he was in a very pivotal scene of Breaking Bad with Walter White. It was the Stay Out of My Territory scene, one of the coolest scenes in the whole show. They also started working with Zach Anner very briefly, right before he went on this run where he won this Oprah contest to have his own reality show. And not to mention the Zellners, Nathan Zellner and his brother ended up becoming huge filmmakers and working with tons of people in Hollywood, bringing people in to Rooster Teeth, and they would immediately make it big right after leaving. Now, this video is going to be 2 hours, so I'm going to include some of my own little personal experience in here. This is around the time where I discovered Rooster Teeth. I was a freshman in high school, and I came home from football practice with a teammate. We were playing Halo, and he said, "Do you ever think the warthog kind of looks like a puma?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Oh, I got to show you this video." So he showed me episode 2 of Red vs. Blue. It was just hilarious. At the time, you weren't really used to web shorts on the internet, at least I wasn't, so I just thought that was it. The few things we watched were it. It was like the Potter Puppet Pals, if you know about that. You watch it and it's over. A few years later, they released a few shorts, and one of them I saw was the one with Jeff where he was being questioned about his drug test because he used blue Gatorade instead of yellow Gatorade, where people would usually use a yellow Gatorade to make it look like urine. And I didn't know what the guys looked like, and I just saw that skit and I thought it was interesting, and that was kind of it. Later on, I ended up seeing the fake Angry Birds movie trailer. I saw an RTAA put finally 4 and 4 together and realized, oh, I've been watching the same people all this time. But enough about me. So like I said, this is the office where they started the Drunk Tank, and the Drunk Tank, it was so far ahead of its time. And yes, there were other podcasts going, but it's so interesting to go back and listen to the first few episodes because it's such a time capsule. And they had filmed and recorded several episodes already, and they just never put them out because they didn't like them or they didn't flow the right way. And the first few episodes of the Drunk Tank, I mean, I love all of the Rooster Teeth podcasts in the Drunk Tank, but the first few episodes of the Drunk Tank are just amazing. In one of the first episodes, they get a caller, a guy in Northern Michigan who just called Rooster Teeth because he found their number online in some White Pages directory, and they put him on the show and they start talking to him, and he's kind of funny and he doesn't really know what's happening and he doesn't know who he's talking to. They'll go on these 40-minute tangents about Lost or about World of Warcraft because they're kind of figuring out what they're doing with it. It was so crazy at the time because when you're listening to it, you're like, this is so weird, but it's so compelling. And it was one thing for me that especially I think got lost as the show went on, and not in a negative way. They didn't really know what to do, so they kind of just talked about the things that they were involved in. And definitely it stayed like that long term, but the thing that it lost was they knew they were making a production that a lot of people would see, so it felt more polished. The early Drunk Tank is not polished. They're telling unflattering stories about themselves and their lives, being very open about a lot of things. And of course, they're still performative, and you can't listen to those early Drunk Tanks and think you have some idea of who they are as a person. But still, it's really fascinating to go back and listen to because, wow, they're really open about a lot of things, and they say some stuff, and not all of it ages great. You know, I think all of them have been very open with the fact they regret some of the things they said back then, but I still think it's worth a listen. You should go back and take a look if you haven't already. I'm one of those people who has listened to the first 200 episodes of The Drunk Tank probably 5 or 6 times over the last 15 years, and I probably will continue to do it. I'm a big fan. There are some episodes I feel like I could quote from beginning to end, and I know there's a bunch of other people out there like that. And honestly, you guys are the ones I'm making this video for. So they're making the shorts. Achievement Hunter's kicking off, and this is about the time I think that Monty got on their radar, and they saw the Monty short Haloid that he made, and it was such a cool thing. And man, I'm gonna throw a clip in here, but God, you have to go watch it if you haven't seen it. For most of my life was not someone who was into animation. Even with Red vs. Blue, I didn't really consider that anime or animation. I mean, I watched Dragon Ball Z when I was a kid, and I watched a little Sailor Moon, maybe some Gundam Wing, but all of it was around when Dragon Ball Z was on television. So I was really only watching Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon, but that's when I was a kid, and I was very averse to animation. But man, as someone who was averse to animation back then, I wish I was watching things like Haloid. That video is so cool to this day. Monty was so talented. It's really mind-boggling how good he was at what he did and how he was just a single guy doing it. Of course, a lot of you probably know the story. Rooster Teeth sees this and they say, we've got to hire this guy. They talk to him, have this conversation with him. He doesn't pick up on the fact that they want to hire him. They don't pick up on the fact that he just thinks this is a casual conversation. Nothing happens, but then they end up bringing him on, and Red vs. Blue at that point was changed forever. But he starts working on this project on the side, which I'm sure you know what it is, but we'll pause for now. And before I leave the Congress office, one of my favorite stories that they talked about was that the air conditioner never worked. They said it was just miserable. It was always hot. This is in the Drunk Tank podcast. I'm not sure if they told the story anywhere else, but they bring in this air conditioning company and they look at it and they say, hey, look, this new unit's going to cost you about $25,000. And in their lease, they were on the hook for it. So they knew they would have to pay it. And they were like, geez, we don't want to pay that much money, but it's so hot and we're dying. They were actually showing up. They would show up at like nighttime, 8 or 9 o'clock at night to beat the Austin heat and just work all night and then go back to their homes during the daytime. I mean, it must have been just brutal. They bring out this guy for a second opinion and he kind of comes in and he's like, hey, where you got like a spot where I can hook up a hose? And he hooks up a hose and he just fixes their air conditioner. And it doesn't seem like it was for a long period of time, but at least for the short term, he fixes the air conditioner. And I don't even think he charged him for it. In fact, they had a bathroom. Bernie thought there was a limiter on the hot water because the hot water would only run for a second and then go out. And then the guy comes back and he says, hey, you know, and you didn't have hot water in that sink. And Bernie's like, oh yeah, no, know, it's this limiter that actually stops us from, they don't want the water to get too hot. He was like, no, that's not what it is. It was just this problem down there, but I fixed it. I turned the knob, so it's good too. So he just threw that in for free. So this guy was a water genius. I don't know. That story is just really funny to me. I love this Austin plumber coming in and just saving their lives for such little effort. A few of my other favorite shorts from this era is the Food War short. I'm not even going to go into explaining it now, but it's really crazy. You should go back and watch that one. I also really like the Lunch Bunch short where rat poison that's put in the creatine powder. There's something about that short that's just so funny, and then I love how Bernie throws the sandwich on Gus at the end, and the sound it makes is just really satisfying. But it does lead me to my favorite short that maybe they've ever made, which is the Many Years Ago short. They made it as they were leaving that office, and it was almost like a little time capsule where they're making these old references and talking about, looking forward to the future, but they're acting like it's much earlier than it actually is, and they're making these funny predictions. But it's a really sweet video. It's really nice, and I really like it, and it's one that I go back to a lot. And they leave the office with this kind of theme of, hey, things are going to be okay. We're going to keep doing what we're doing, and things are only going to get better. Meanwhile, up in Canada, they were actually putting together RVBTO, or Red vs. Blue Toronto, which was the first fan event that was organized by a few big fans up there, including Barbara Dunkelman, who we'll get to in a little bit. I know they also put together some fan events in Australia. They had this international audience on top of having a big audience in the United States, and it goes back to what Bernie and them have said several times in the past, which was when they were asked about things like moving to LA. They said that was the beauty of the internet. You can make this content wherever you were. You didn't have to be in LA. It was decentralized now because of the internet. And it is funny because LA, of course, is a place people still flock to, but now Austin has become this mecca of internet content where people are coming from all over the world to start making stuff in Austin, Texas. And I have to believe that they were a big driving force of that. I know part of the reason that I'm in Austin now is because I heard about it so much on the podcast, and just more and more things that were happening here, it just looked like a really alluring place to live. In fact, speaking on that, they had talked about moving the company a few times. One of my favorite things they talked about is launching like this thing called like Roosterville, where they were going to buy a neighborhood up in Detroit when the prices of homes were extremely low, and just buy like a whole cul-de-sac and turn it into this like Rooster Teeth production village. I love to think that there's this timeline where they're all just living in this cul-de-sac for a decade. I can't imagine how quickly they would have gotten tired of each other. But ultimately they did all decide, we're staying in Austin, this is where we want to be. But all these fans all over the world wanted to see them and wanted to kind of get together and form this community. And the community had already been growing so much online. I realized really quickly that there was no way they could make content fast enough to keep up with the audience. So that's what born the community site, aside from the need for sponsors, but a community site where the fans could talk and entertain each other and form this tight-knit group of fans that were all aligned in a common interest. And the community has been so awesome, and I have so many amazing stories with people from the community. And the cool thing about this community is it's been ever-changing, but they're so driven to show their love and support for what they enjoy. So they're putting on full-on conventions that they have no expectation, I think, that these guys would go out there and see it. But still, Bernie, Jeff, Gus, Joel, people would go out all over the world to see these people and be appreciated. These events like RVBTO pave the way to show them that, hey, something like RTX in Austin could be possible. Now, I will say, it's at this point in the drive where I've realized this is going to be a 2-hour video, and if I hit the offices in order, it's going to quickly turn into a 3-hour video, just with traffic and having to go all the way back south to go back north. So we're going to go a little out of order, but we're going to keep talking, just telling stories, talking about Rooster Teeth, because that's the whole point of what we're doing here. While we're downtown, I think it'd be really important to talk about RTX, especially since we're talking about fan conventions. RTX was this really magical thing that I don't think enough people got to experience. Now, certainly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people experienced it over the 12, 13, 14 years that it was running. But because of money and being in college and then grad school, I wasn't really able to get to go to RTX until 2018. And I want to try to put this in perspective for people who didn't get to go, so you could kind of see what it was like. There was a Thursday, they rented out this place called the Sunset Room, and in it, they had turned the whole thing into a little Rooster Teeth lounge, where it was a store, with some cool items, some more high-priced items. They were giving out the Rooster Brew, which was the Rooster Teeth beer that a local company had brewed and packaged with this RTX label. And I'm waiting in line to go inside. I didn't know anybody there. there. I got an Airbnb with these 5 random people from one of the Discord servers. But right when I got there, I found out that they were all cosplayers and they were all really into RWBY, which is something that I hadn't really watched. I felt a little out of my element, but I walked over because I knew they were starting this store the day before the convention started and I wanted to get in line. So I get in line and I start talking to the person next to me, and he mentions something about Rooster Teeth, and I say, you know, what one of my favorite videos is, and then instantly it was like we were best friends. But then he had to go do something. He realized he didn't check in at his hotel, so he leaves. So I just start talking to the next guy next to me, and it was the same thing. It was like we were instant best friends. You have this shared thing that everyone knows you're a part of. And it was really weird for me going from, I grew up in a small town in Georgia, and I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to about Rooster Teeth. Even my friend who introduced me to it fell off of Red vs. Blue pretty quick. So I'd be going for 10 years as being a fan without really having any interaction with people about Rooster Teeth and not really talking to anyone in real life about it. And now I'm standing in a line in the sweltering Austin heat, and I start talking to these people, and we all understand the references each other are making. We all feel like we're in this secret club, but there's, 50, 60 of us sitting in this line, and we're all having a great time, and we're just standing in line. We should be miserable, but it's just such a good time. And then out of nowhere, Bernie in his yellow Borderlands cel-shaded Tesla pulls up, and everyone just goes crazy. And he rolls down the window, and he waves at everyone. Everyone's clapping and cheering, and I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm going, I feel like they made this new little city and dropped a bunch of people exactly like me in it, and the whole thing just felt like this playground. I mean, it's so hard to explain. It felt like this place that was just made for you, and it felt like you were escaping the world for a whole weekend. And I ended up going into the store, I bought some things, and I talked to the guys, and we said we would meet up later in the convention, the ones that were around me, but we didn't. But it was totally fine because I had that interaction at every single place that I went to at RTX. And that's why it's a huge bummer for me when I see people that say, I really wish I would have got to go to RTX because it looks like it was such a magical place. And man, really, that's even an understatement. But I really agree that it was so special, and it was something that I don't think a lot of people get to experience, especially as someone who, I grew up, like I said, playing football. I was really involved with sports, and people in that were kind of closeted about their nerd stuff back then. And I know them now, and I think I know a lot of people who would really benefit from having that experience of kind of going off in their own little world and being engrossed in this fandom and community. I have so many stories about RTX and things that happened. I don't want to just make the whole video about me, though I do want to tell some Rooster Teeth stories, some Rooster Teeth lore, and just some personal stories. One of the things I do want to talk about, because I just am still so grateful for these people, they did a thing at the time where you'd enter a lottery to pick who you would get to have your autograph session with, and it was usually with 2 or 3 people, and I pulled a lottery ticket that was pretty far back in the queue, and I ended up getting someone who I didn't really know. So I started talking to a few random fans in the Discord, and I said, hey, I got these tickets to meet these guys. Do you guys know them? I was really hoping to get someone else because I'm not really familiar with these guys, but maybe show me some videos that I could watch to get familiar with these guys. And they weren't even Rooster Teeth employees. They were just guests to the convention. And just this random fan who I didn't know, he private messages me on Discord or maybe the website and says, hey, I've met Jeff and Gus a bunch of times and I picked them, but you seem to be somebody who it's your first RTX and I want it to be cool for you, so I'll give you my code. So this person who I didn't know, and the crazy part too is they didn't even see my original messages. A friend of theirs told them about my message, and then that person reached out to me, sought me out, found me, and sent this message that they just wanted to make my RTX amazing. And they gave me the code, and I ended up meeting Jeff and Gus, and it was such a cool experience. And I got to sit in line, and I was at the front of the line, but I was in I had a lower badge tier, so I had to wait for the higher badge tier people to get their autograph signed first. But because I was at the front, I got to watch Jeff and Gus kind of at a booth just riff for about an hour and a half with every single person who went up there, and they were just so turned on and so hyped and really made the experience so unique for everyone. And that was something that was super fascinating because a lot of people say don't meet your heroes, and I don't know how many people consider the people at Rooster Teeth heroes, but boy, that isn't the case for these guys, at least the ones I've met in person, because meeting Jeff, and Jeff has a great story about when he was a huge fan of Charles Barkley. and when he was 16, he was living in Florida, and Charles Barkley was coming to play a game there. He snuck out of school. He risked everything because he was going to the game that night, but Charles Barkley was signing basketball cards that morning. So he goes to this card shop, meets Charles Barkley, and just has a kind of a negative experience. Charles Barkley's clearly tired. He's, understandably has to do this all the time, and he kind of gives Jeff this answer to something, and Jeff left really bummed and didn't really want to meet his heroes after that, because he basically said that he's like, oh, this sucks. People can't live up to this expectation that we build in our heads. But boy, that could be further from the truth with these guys. I mean, they made a moment with every single person that I saw go up there. I mean, Rooster Teeth fans, some of them aren't great socially, and they're not very bubbly. It seemed like they had this unending pool of energy where they would pull from and just make every person's day who talked to them. I know in my little 2-minute interaction with them, it was nothing in the grand scheme of their day, and I was one of thousands of people they talked to, and that was part of what made the weekend one of the best weekends of my life. I mean, it was that good, and they were just so great, and it didn't get old. Even with me, they put on a show for every single person who went up there. It's such a masterclass that I think everyone who gets big on social media should have to sit down and watch them at a convention to see how well they do with people. We might talk more about RTX later, but I just wanted to shout them out. These guys were so amazing. Every person I talked to, everyone from Bernie to Matt to Barbara to Meg Turney, everyone I met at RTX could not have been nicer and more engaged when they had every reason to just hide in the back halls and not engage with the fans between events. I'm not sure if I'll be able to mention every Rooster Teeth person in this video, especially even just the on-camera talent is so many people, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Jack now. So Jack Patillo went to the University of Texas, and he was a part of the broadcast group. He ended up working at a radio station for a little while. I think he was doing sports radio. A lot of people may know that he went out and did some videos out in California, but this is around the time where he had his little faux pas with Rooster Teeth, where they had an Xbox that was very important. It had basically some software, probably a game. They've never said what exactly it was, but some software for a commercial they were making. Jack had it in the backseat of his car, and his car was actually broken into while he was watching a movie at the Alamo on 6th Street. And it was broken into, and they took the console, and Jack comes out. The police found the car and tried calling him. So Jack comes out, finds the window shattered, and they call Bernie, and Bernie and Jeff basically have this meltdown of, oh my God, we're going to get fired from this contract and we're going to get sued, and the company's basically over now. Before they made the call, they started scouring, crack houses, everything they could all around Austin, trying to find where this Xbox might have been dropped off at, because it had all this proprietary stuff on it. And this was around the same time too that you might remember the one of the iPhone models got left at a bar, and a random guy took the iPhone from the bar and was auctioning it online, and he got sued for a whole bunch of money. So they're panicking about the software being gone, and Jack just kind of bowed out for a little while and left Rooster Teeth. Thankfully, of course, we know he came back, and we know that he got back involved with the company, but the story got offhandedly mentioned on one Rooster Teeth podcast a few years ago. They actually had to come on and retell the story because they didn't want fans to be speculating about the time that Jack was fired, because that's how it was mentioned, just kind of as a joke. But Achievement Hunter started with the first Drunk Tank podcast episode. That was when they made the achievement bet. People get confused. There were a lot of different bets, but the two main bets that are talked about in that first episode are, one, the bet that already had occurred and happened under protest, is what Jeff says. Jeff and Bernie basically had a bet to see who could get the Mile High Club achievement in the Call of Duty game, which was a very notoriously difficult achievement. I never got it myself. I wish I did. The loser then apparently had to do either a real life achievement or an online achievement that the winner got to choose. So Jeff ended up losing that. As a part of the deal, Bernie wanted him to do a real life achievement, but then changed it to a video game achievement for the website, which was he wanted him to get the 7-Day Survivor achievement from Dead Rising. And if you never played Dead Rising or never tried to get that achievement, you basically have to babysit your console for 2 days. Really a whole weekend of just every 20 minutes or so when your controller turns off, you have to turn it back on, feed your character, and then you have to go out and scavenge more food. And it's not a super difficult achievement, but man, it blows your whole weekend. Supposedly, Jeff didn't do this under protest, and that was why they wanted to record this conversation, so they knew for the future, because nobody ever remembered this protest that he was putting up. They just said he welched on the bet. So the bet that really started Achievement Hunter, though, was they ran a contest on the website to see who could get the most gamer score in a week. And I want to say that Andrew Panton won that competition, and he got something like 5,000 or 6,000 gamer score. And Jeff remarked to the rest of the group that he was kind of disappointed because he thought the number could be a lot higher. So the bet ended up being that Jeff would try to get 10,000 gamer score in a week. And if he did that, Bernie would end up paying him $1,000. But if he didn't, he would have to pay Bernie $1,000. If you haven't heard this discussion, you got to go back and listen to it because they go through a bunch of different variations. I understand why people get confused, but that's what the bet ends up being. They even talk about moving the whole lineup to 15,000 gamer score in a week, which Jeff claims he would be able to do, but they end up sticking with the 10,000. And then, of course, Jeff ends up winning. They put this on the Achievement Hunter site, and people start blowing up Jeff during the competition, trying to slow him down because Bernie gave out his gamer tag. And there's a really cool video that they recorded of Jeff getting the last achievement, and he ended up getting the 10,000 gamer score in just 3 days. The one thing I wish he would have done, and he kind of joked about it on the podcast, but I really wish he would have made his last achievement the 7-day survivor achievement to really stick it to Bernie. Again, that would have wasted 2 whole days for sure. Speaking of Achievement Hunter, pretty much everyone involved doesn't really like the name of Achievement Hunter. They think it's kind of lame, or at the very least, it doesn't really describe what they ended up doing, which, I mean, I guess that's true, but I always loved the name, and it was definitely something I used to get achievements on Xbox. I mean, I would type in Achievement Hunter and whatever achievement I was trying to get. My favorite little fun fact, though, about the name is that originally Jeff bought the domain for it called Achieve Min, which, they stuck with Achievement Hunter, and that's when we started getting AWU, the Achievement Hunter weekly update, the really cool intros where people would say the number out in front of the episode. I've seen a lot of Reddit posts where people say, like, oh, this is what I made for my number. I was number 63. Which also reminds me, too, the early part of the Rooster Teeth podcast and really the Drunk Tank, they would allow people to submit their own theme songs. So it's this fun little dive into the musical talent, or sometimes lack thereof, of the community of people putting together these songs. I remember one guy did kind of a doo-wop group where he was actually singing all 5 or 6 different tracks and then layered them all on top of each other for the song. I really kind of missed that as it went on. I think there was a little while in the Rooster Teeth podcast where they put those songs at the end, but that was once they started going on camera. So I know they eventually ended up getting rid of that, but boy, that was a really funny time. And every theme song, there's a few that I know that are just stuck in my head every few months, and it's fun to go back and listen to them. I even remember one was named like Moshing in a Minivan, or maybe that was the name of their band, I don't know. So like I said, we're going out of order as far as the driving, but I'm going to keep talking in order of the company, and I don't know if I'll finish the whole history. This is, again, just for this drive. Maybe we'll do a part 2 where we continue the history and the lore, and again, this is not supposed to be comprehensive. I'm doing my best off the cuff to remember all this stuff. Maybe one day we'll sit down and try to draw out a real timeline of everything. But that's when the group decided, okay, we're getting too big, there's too many people here, we're running out of room, so that's when they moved the office down to 636 Ralph Ablanedo. If you listen to the Anima podcast, Gustavo and Jeff give a lot of different areas that they had actually looked to move the office to. And it's not really relevant for people who haven't lived in Austin or at least visited Austin, but you should definitely go listen to it and then pull it up on Google Maps, some of the places, and it really changes things. One of the things was like an old Walmart that they were going to repurpose into a Rooster Teeth office, and they go through 5 or 6 of these places, and all of them are kind of interesting, but I'm glad they went with what they did. So we do end up going to 636, so you'll see it later, but this is the office that I think the largest number of fans really see as Rooster Teeth's home office in their head, which makes sense. This is where Achievement Hunter exploded. This is where RWBY began. This was a really pivotal office for the whole company. A fun little thing that I remember, I don't remember why it sticks in my memory so much with the office, one of the things that delayed them moving in, the city of Austin required them to have a bike rack out front, and for a while, my job took me right in front of Ralph Ablanedo every single morning. Every single morning I would drive by and glance over at 636, and I would look at that bike rack, and it's just funny because they complained so much about that bike rack and all of the effort that they had to go to putting in that bike rack. But 636 had this really cool layout where you would walk in and there were these 4 offices, and then there was a staircase that went up, and they had a little break room off to the side, and then up the staircase, I know it was like Bernie's office, and I think that's where some of the animators were. Then they had the annex that was through this little gate and made up part of these other buildings. You can actually see it in my little video that I made last week. There's so much I want to talk about with this Ralph Ablanedo office, and probably so many things you remember. One thing I'll talk about is the RT Lifes, that they didn't start here, but they had so many new employees here that Bernie, he handed out, at first they were these flip cameras. Do you remember those? They were these flip cameras that would record HD video, and he told people to just film, put it together and release it as what life was like at the Rooster Teeth. These videos were so fun. I remember so many of them. There was one where Barbara, Chris, and a few people all dressed up to go to the Chick-fil-A across the street, because if you dressed up as a cow, you got free Chick-fil-A. There was one where they're skateboarding on the 4th of July and doing jumps. There's one where they were staying late working on something. Maybe it was RWBY, and they just made little game games to keep themselves entertained. I think my favorite RT Life that came out at this time was there was this car jump video that they did where someone on Reddit just posted on the Austin subreddit and said their car needed a jump and they needed someone to come help them. And they just so happened to have some fans visiting Rooster Teeth, and they just came up with the idea, Bernie, Gus, Brandon, that, hey, we're going to go save this person. We're going to go jump their car. Great video. Go watch it. They end up not going to the right place. Barbara was there too and helping navigate, but they wouldn't listen to Barbara. It's really funny, and I've actually talked to the person whose car they jumped on Reddit, and she said they were really funny and it was such a weird experience. And finding out about it later, she said that it was so weird that she didn't know who they were, obviously, but to see the video get kind of popular, and I think one of her friends pointed it out to her and said, hey, do you know you're in this internet video? And she found out, I think she said a few years later. But I really want to juxtapose that because I know that I watched those RT Lives when I was in college and thought, man, I want to work for a company like that. I want to work at a place where it just looks like it's so much fun to come to work every single day. And then I just thought Bernie and the founders just had it made in the shade, and they were just, they were living on top of the world. But listening to Morning Somewhere, Bernie and Ashley's podcast, Bernie's had Jeff on a few times. It's really something that I recommend a lot of people go listen to. At least the episodes where Bernie brings on old Rooster Teeth employees, brings on Jeff, and they talk about how strapped they were for cash. The example that they give is Jeff was about to do a landscaping job on his house. They needed to change up they had to put down a deposit for this landscaping thing where they had to have it, measured, and the people had to come out and they had to put a deposit down, and it was several $1,000s. They sat down, he told Bernie about it, and Bernie basically told him, hey, I don't know if I would get that done. I don't know if I would pay to get all that done because things are pretty tight. You actually hear that things behind the scenes were way tighter and way more hectic than we ever saw. This was something we didn't see at the time, and it's cool to hear their perspective on what things were actually like at the company. It's at this point we got to start bringing in members of Achievement Hunter. You have Ray, who was found he made a video in Castle Wolfenstein. It was a game I played a ton when I was a kid, but they re-released it for the Xbox 360. You can actually go back and find the drunk tank where they had shared the video amongst themselves of this kid named Brown Man who made this really funny achievement guide in Wolfenstein, and they were like, oh, that kid is really, really funny. And of course, he ends up getting hired pretty soon after that. A lot of people know, of course, Michael, Rage Quit. He got his start making these Rage Quit videos in New Jersey, and he just got so popular. They found out about him because of a Crackdown video where he had to chase down these orbs that would float and fly away from you, and it was a collectible item that they made ridiculously difficult to collect all of. Really funny video. Most people, I think, remember either his Impossible Game video or I remember Volcar the Viking. I don't remember when that's from, but that's one that stuck with me. So then that gets us to our kind of second set of core members after it was just Jack and Jeff at Achievement Hunter. Now we have Jack, Jeff, Michael, Ray, and Gavin then switched over. Gavin, I haven't really talked about much, but I think Gavin is one, incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent, and he has been the unsung hero of Rooster Teeth. And if you haven't been watching things like the Regulation podcast and you haven't been keeping abreast of what Gavin's been doing and what he did over the last 10 years plus at Rooster Teeth, this guy started out as a fan and he wanted to work at Rooster Teeth. He started coming over when he was a teenager to just help them make stuff because he was such a big fan. And he finally decided he wanted to be able to move to the United States and work for them. So he launched this YouTube channel based off of the slow-mo work he was doing, where he was an apprentice for a guy with a slow-mo camera. He makes this whole YouTube channel, one of the biggest and most popular YouTube channels of the last 20 years, that's still putting out huge hit videos that new people are discovering every single day. He makes this channel with the sole focus to get hired at Rooster Teeth. I mean, if that isn't the picture of this crazy fandom, I don't know what is. And Gavin gets this job, and obviously they already knew who he was, but now he has this perfect reason to work there. He ends up partnering slow-mo guys with Rooster Teeth for a while. I know he directs some episodes of Red vs. Blue. I mean, the guy did it all, and boy, it's really easy to fall into his Carl Pilkington kind of persona, but the guy does not get enough credit. Like I said before, he's even hoarding a bunch of the old Rooster Teeth stuff to make sure it didn't get destroyed. He even talks about some of the new podcasts like Anma or the Good Morning Gustavo podcast, which are the same thing, but he says how he's too afraid to listen to it because he thinks it's the perfect thing to listen to like 20 years in the future because he likes the podcast that much. He's still that much of a fan after working with these guys for 20 years. And I couldn't think of a bigger endorsement. He's been through so much, and to still be such a diehard fan and care so much about the property, support him, support the Regulation Podcast. They're fantastic. But he comes on at Achievement Hunter, and the Achievement Hunter videos shifted pretty quickly thanks to Gavin and Jeff. The videos were normally these achievement guide videos, the weekly updates about video games, and then Gavin and Jeff just sat down to play a game of MLB The Show, which is a baseball game, and they just started riffing. Gavin didn't know much about American baseball, so they went off, and it's the perfect time capsule. They didn't even know what they were doing was called a Let's Play. They make this video, the two of them, just voicing over a video game footage, and it was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen at the time. And even then, it was so forward thinking, and I'm sure someone else had done it at the time or had beat them, but boy, the way it just caught fire with them. They kept this up, but really, I can't talk about the story of Achievement Hunter without mentioning Minecraft. That was, I think, what shot them into the stratosphere. I had played a good bit of Minecraft, and maybe I'd been playing Minecraft for a few months when they released their first Minecraft Let's Play. That video went insane. It launched this series, and there were other Minecraft series going at this point. There were other Let's Plays, but it was so huge. If you weren't watching at that time, it's impossible to describe what it was like. I mean, these videos were all hitting 1 million. You were waiting on pins and needles for every Friday. I remember even one time where the video was late. It didn't come out at the normal time, and fans were just blowing up their Twitter, angry of where's the video. Ray was responding to tweets saying, hey, we're working on it, we're trying to figure it out. What an interesting problem to have, where these people are just ravenous and tearing you apart because they want you to just release your weekly video. It's no wonder they got tired of Minecraft and some other games they were playing. I mean, trying to keep up with that every single week and keeping it fresh. I mean, the things people complained about as fans are so funny. There was a huge bit of drama because you may remember, or if you don't know, every week they would compete for the Tower of Pimps, which was something that Gavin built as when he was drunk playing Minecraft with Joel and them, which was 4 gold blocks stacked on top of an obsidian block. And they would run a competition every week, and whoever won the competition in the Let's Play would win the Tower of Pimps. And then they ended up actually even getting a little metallic magnetic Tower of Pimps, and they would put that on everyone's desk. And they started running this show called Go. This was one of my favorite shows, where Jeff would get the whole group together and he would give them an achievement that they had to do, or it wouldn't be necessarily a true achievement. It might be do a barrel roll in a plane in any video game, and you just had to run off and get it done as fast as possible. So then they had this board up where they had the scores of who won each episode, because once you won 5 episodes in a row, you won a pizza party. So of course they can't film these videos back to back. They're filming them out of order. They're filming them in clumps. Maybe they're filming them for a vacation. So people were actually analyzing the backgrounds of these videos and saying, oh, well, the Tower of Pimps is on Jack's desk, and it was already on Gavin's desk, so that means that Jack wins the next Minecraft Let's Play. And oh, look at the Go poster, Ray has 5 now, that means he actually won the pizza party. We haven't seen that episode yet. I mean, it was crazy. People would get so bent out of shape about it. I'm not looking back now and trying to distance myself from it. I had horrible takes back then, and we'll go through some of them. But boy, it was this giant community. It was all of this momentum, and people just wanted it to be good. And everyone had their different opinions on what their version of good would be. There's no way I could cover all the different Let's Play series that they launched at Ralph Ablanedo. One of the seminal things I remember, though, is they, did the Grand Theft Auto 4 videos, where they would do cops and crooks. And the cops and crooks videos were so funny. It was when half of the group would be cops, and the other half would be criminals, and they would have to try to get from one point to another point on the map. I actually just posted a short with one of these clips where Gavin and his team are in dump trucks, and they go off this interstate ramp right in front of the cops, and you see these huge dump trucks flying through the air, and Gavin yells out, "It's just like Speed." When they were putting out these videos every week, I mean, you'd be clutching your stomach laughing, and you just needed more of it. The problem at the time was they couldn't put out the content fast enough. People were eating it up. They would have a video every day, but most of the videos for a while, at least for like a year, you'd get like a things to do on Wednesday, and it might be 10-15 minutes long. You'd get a top 10 video on a Tuesday, and they just weren't enough. I mean, you would immediately consume it. Me and my best friend when we were in college, we'd both sit out on the couch, we'd get our snacks, and we'd watch the Minecraft Let's Play. It was an institution for us. And boy, if it was bad, it was like your favorite sports team lost. It was like a huge disappointment. None of them were actually bad, but you'd say, oh, that wasn't as good as last week, or you'd be like, oh man, Jack won the Let's Play. Man, he tries so hard to win. I don't know why the rest of the guys don't try to win, because we all had these terrible opinions when we're watching them. This is really what my whole point is ultimately with what Achievement Hunter was doing. And I'm so glad they've started to say this recently. They were the guys pioneering this for the most part on the internet, and they made it look so easy and so accessible. And that actually bore this problem where people like me, even I'll say, just watch it and go, I could do that. I could do what they're doing. They should let me on there too. I would be a great addition. I'm good at video games. And that's not what it was. It was this mix of performative with playing the game, with keeping up with the conversation, with improv. It's a whole lot of moving parts that they just made seem so easy. And my most embarrassing take, I haven't even talked about yet, but it is related to the Grand Theft Auto Let's Plays, because then the Xbox One came out. They mined a whole bunch of content from the Xbox One release. They had a bunch of jokes about the Kinect and the telling their Xbox to turn off. Gavin, of course, did his stack of consoles. He had his Xbox One stacked on top of his Xbox 360. But another huge series they did was the Grand Theft Auto videos. When they launched Grand Theft Auto Online, it was supposed to launch with these heists, which, of course, if you've played Grand Theft Auto since, they ended up doing. But they didn't have the heists for a long time. They said the heist would come out on a certain date, and everyone at Achievement Hunter said, we're going to play these heists. I couldn't wait. I wanted to see them run these heists. I had played the heists in the main game, so I wanted to see them run a heist. Finally, they hit a point where they just said, we're going to do it on our own. So they put together my favorite video Achievement Hunter ever made, which was the very first heist video, where it starts in live action and they all sit down in a room, a planning room with all of them, and they sit down at a whiteboard, and it's black and white, like an old heist movie, even kind of reminiscent of the Ocean's 11 movies where they're talking about the plan as it's happening, and they plan out a heist. They're just going to rob a convenience store in the game. They just made their own heist. The planning that went into it, the whole video is like 45 minutes, but the heist itself only lasts 5 or 6 minutes. The whole thing was so much effort, and it was so amazing. And then, of course, it launched. They all each did their own individual heist. It was all such great content. I mean, I'll never forget certain things like Ray defending the plane on the plane to take off from Power Street, and Ray's telling him to just go as he's holding back the cops. These are videos I still quote with my best friend now when we run into each other. And I don't want to dog on the fans and not dog on myself, so I will give you my worst take that I had for Achievement Hunter, where one of the videos that they did, where they did a heist video. It was one of their custom heists, I think, where they broke someone out of prison, and it was a really funny video. They released a behind the scenes, and I can't remember if it was for sponsors or not, but they released this behind the scenes video where they showed how they set up for the heist. They're like, okay, so Gavin's going to come in from this angle. Oh, it would be really funny if Gavin shot Ray's helicopter. Oh yeah, that'd be really funny. Like, okay, we'll do that. And they would set it up and do it. And boy, I know for a fact, and I'm so glad the site's gone, and I hope it can't be recovered, because I, on my old account, wrote a treatise on how this was appalling, and I couldn't believe that they staged these videos that took all of the magic and the joy out of it. And oh man, it was probably 10 or 11 years ago. I wish I could say I was like 14, 22, probably 21, and I can't believe how long it was. And I was checking it for grammar. I was making sure it was really well written, because I was like, this is going to change their mind. This is going to be, they're going to realize what they did to screw this up. I actually stopped watching Achievement Hunter Let's Plays for a while. It's true. And it's really embarrassing, but that's, hey, we all learn. We say stupid things. We think we know everything. The theme of this whole talk that I was really been wanting to hit is they made it look easy. They made it look like some idiot in a rural college in Georgia could do it just as good as they could. Of course, Rooster Teeth made a whole bunch of shorts at this office. Going over some of my favorites are the Techno Prank, the Prank Wars short. I also think one of my favorites is the Gary Busey short, where they get the guy from RWBY and the Chief who came down, and everyone mistakes him for Gary Busey for some reason, but then they mistake him for Nick Nolte. Really underrated Brandon Farmahini moment in that video, if you ever go back and watch it. When they realize it's not Gary Busey, Bernie says, wait, it's Nick Nolte. And they all get angry, and you just hear Brandon go, why does this keep happening? It never fails to make me laugh. A lot of big shorts, but I think it's important now that we move on to one of the pillars of Rooster Teeth, which is Monty Oum. Monty was working with Rooster Teeth at the time, and he was working on this side project. They would tease it a little bit on the podcast, and before we even get into that, I loved Monty on the podcast. A lot of people may not even remember him. He showed up a few times, and he was super abrasive. And I think for anybody who didn't know him, he would probably come off as abrasive due to how efficient he was with things and how he didn't like to waste time. And he would come on the podcast and he would interrupt them and tell them that they had told these stories before, and he was very blunt. But it was this really funny thing where he was actually a huge fan of the podcast. He listened to the podcast all the time. So there were a lot of fans who, like me, were like, oh, they've already told this story before. And I'm a fan of, obviously I love the stories. I'm here giving a 2-hour video about the stories. Monty would he loved him so much, he'd be like, no, we've already heard that story. Do a new story, or like do something else. I think a lot of fans at the time didn't understand that this is really a labor of love from Monty. It's Monty saying that, hey, make more good stuff. I've listened to all of this. Make more. Boy, if that wasn't at least the kind of person that he seemed like from the outside, just a efficiency machine who had to do things the right way. They talked about how he would have when he would be working, he would have a monitor set up running like The Matrix or Red versus Blue, and just running really slowly with something like at half speed, and he'd be watching the animations. They say he would stay all the way through the night. They say they'd leave and come back, and Monty was still just working on a project. They'd have to force him to get sleep, and he would just power down. That kind of dedication, and when you know you're making something that's that good, it must just be such a driving force. We saw it with the guys when they first started Rooster Teeth. This driving force of, we need to put this out there. This is too good. We can't just keep this to ourselves. So they teased it for a while, and then they came out with the Red trailer, the RWBY Red trailer. Wow. I would, again, at that point in my life, I'm not watching animation. I'm not watching anime. We put that on, and it was so beautiful. The music, the scythe weapon, it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like, how much money did they spend on this show? And it turned out it's just Monty just cranking out animations with a small team. It really blew me away. I did end up watching RWBY, and I embarrassingly would say that I haven't watched RWBY. At RTX 2018, I sat down, and the RWBY cosplayers that I was with forced me to watch the first season of RWBY. Well, no, I say forced. They didn't force me. They said, you have to watch it. It's so good. And we sat down, and we were having drinks, and I watched it. But I remember blacking out somewhere around, they had been at the school for a little while, and then the next day, they told me that we had actually watched the whole first 2 seasons, and I don't remember anything from it. But I have watched a few clips, and unfortunately I've watched some of those longer negative videos about it, so I know a lot of the common complaints, but you see this group of fans that are so dedicated to it, and I would have to sit down and watch it one day. Maybe I'll do it for one of these videos and run through RWBY and get my own opinion on it. I think this would serve as a good transition too to one of the best talks that Bernie gave at a conference. He talked about the power of a community and the power of an audience. It's this really great speech. If somebody wants the information, I'll find it and send you the link. Bernie gave this speech on the movie that they ended up crowdfunding, Laser Team. I was someone who, no money, I really wanted to support it. I actually asked my parents for money to help support it. They told me no. They're like, no, you're not gonna help some movie maker make a movie. I was like, no, you don't understand. There's perks, there's things, but they didn't do it. So I watched this fundraiser that they did, this live stream, all of the money that poured in. I know it was over $1 million, and it was this huge feat. I think it might have been the highest funded thing ever on Indiegogo, and it maybe stayed that way forever. But Bernie gives this talk where he talks about the number of people watching you online, and how you can't define yourself based on that number, and how it's so easy to get locked down in that number. And he gives this speech, and he talks about the power of a fandom and the power of a really engaged small community, and how to cater to that small community. And there's this really cool moment where he talks about RWBY, he talks about all the things that went into it, and then he puts up a picture of these cosplayers that were all cosplaying as RWBY when the show, I think, either hadn't even launched yet, or all the trailers had been out, or maybe they had just done a teaser of the first episode, and there were these people cosplaying as RWBY already, and they took a picture at a convention. And Bernie pointed at it and he said, that would show up as a line item for 200 DVDs sold. But that is so much more than 200 DVDs sold. These people are engaged and really want to support this thing. Circling back to the very beginning, this is the community aspect that is so powerful, and it's what made Rooster Teeth different. And I believe it's what Bernie's going to try to capture for the relaunch this summer. But seriously, go back and watch that. It's one of my favorite things he ever did live. It's really great motivation for content creators, I think, and I definitely don't call myself a content creator. This will be my 5th video that I'm basically making about Rooster Teeth, where I'm just getting to talk about things that I probably would have just said to myself for hours on end otherwise. But that does make me remember, though, I didn't mention back in 2010, the PAX 2010 Late Show, which is really my favorite Rooster Teeth thing they ever did live, where they were brought on, and we try not to be negative here. We want to be positive. Remember, positive, not parasocial. But there was this little a late show that they got invited to at PAX, and they get brought up and they're going to be on the show, and Bernie and them did some research into the hosts and wanted to know about what the hosts were doing, and wanted to know about the other guests, so because they wanted to sound, informed when they're up on stage. But the hosts just tried to wing it. They didn't really look into Rooster Teeth. They didn't look into anything about them. They actually introduced them as, I think, Gus and Fred of Rooster Teeth. So then Gus, Bernie, and Jeff, I think it was originally going to be Gus and Jeff, but it ended up being Gus, Bernie, and Jeff went up there, and they torpedoed the whole segment. And it's about a 20-minute video. Count 3D, who is a fan I haven't talked about enough, he has so many great videos and so many awesome stories. I've talked to him a few times over the year, just on the website or on the subreddit, and boy, great dude. Got a lot of really good footage, and he has great seats for this. He's up front. He has 3 videos that he recorded, and then there's one longer video where you actually get to see the whole set, and one video doesn't have great audio, so have to go through them. It was described by, I think, Bernie or Jeff, that they have funny mode and they have ugly mode, and that got ugly really fast. At one point, one of the hosts asked them, hey, you were making these videos in Halo one day, and now here you are. You're on the stage at PAX, you're at the late show, you're headlining. Did you ever think you'd make it this far? He asked very earnestly, and Jeff, who at this point has stuffed an entire bowl of candies into his mouth that they left out for him, and then spit them all back out, leans forward and says, back when we first started the company, we had a wish board. And you just hear Bernie go, we didn't do that. Jeff says, it's where we put all of our big wishes, buy a Lamborghini, stuff like that. And that was actually at the top of my wish board, to be on this show. So I've done it. And there's this long pause, and then the hosts just try to skip over it. I mean, it's a brutal, brutal video. It's not really even mean-spirited, because they clearly don't know. I mean, they literally ask at one point, they call it machinima. They've never seen Red versus Blue. They don't know who they are, and they're kind of standoffish about not knowing who they are. Don't go find these people in 2025, 15 years later, and harass them. They were just underprepared. We've all shown up for a job underprepared, and we paid for it. It was horrifically embarrassing, but it's a video that's so good. If you haven't seen it, I have to recommend it. You're going to get a huge kick out of it. It's only 30 minutes, and it ends with a ukulele song that it's just bizarre. I remember when I first heard that they were actually moving out of Ralph Albonito, and I was super bummed, because that was the place, and I really wanted to move to Austin still. I had wanted to move to Austin for several years at that point, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm missing it. I'm actually missing the chance. So I wrote out an email to Matt Hullum saying I wanted to shadow him. I don't remember what year of college I was in, but I was a business major, and I told him I wanted to shadow him. And again, I really proofed the email. I'm sure there's no way he paired it to my crazy email. It might have even came before my crazy email about the staging the Achievement Hunter video. But I put a whole bunch of effort into it because I really wanted to get this opportunity to shadow these guys. But I was super bummed when they left, because the other thing that started up here was RTX. RTX 2011 was their first convention, and there's some good footage. Again, Count 3D's got some footage of it, of this hotel ballroom where they had this meet and greet. They got to see all of their fans who had traveled to Austin to see them. I don't remember what the number was. I think it was maybe 200 fans went, but then they ended up there was an error with the tickets, so 400 tickets got sold. I want to say there was even some drama about fans saying that they totally meant to have this ticket malfunction, and they did it as some sort of viral marketing, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, the fandom, when you look at a microscope back at the old things they used to say, not even with a microscope, when you look at the things that we used to say back then, it doesn't make sense. It's like looking back at old sports controversies or political controversies from 20, 30 years ago, and they seem so small compared to things now. But RTX 2011, one of those events in my life that I wish I could have went to, but there was no way I had the resources or the ability to get over here at the time. They had RTX 2011, 2012, 2013. It just kept getting bigger, and they would hype it up on the podcast. And I don't know a lot about those events. I've watched a lot of footage. I know at one of them, there was this water balloon fight that Gus got really upset about, because fans and Griffin started pelting him with water balloons. They also, I think it was either at 2011 or 2012, they did the cool Rooster Teeth immersion, where they had all of the fans act as extras, where they were zombies, and they had to try to touch a brain that Gus and Jeff were defending with Nerf guns. Such a cool concept for a video. But that whole field where they shot the video, it's actually a huge bummer. Where the RTX was, it's now this little business park. For a little while, I was looking at some offices and maybe renting an office somewhere in Austin, and I was looking at renting one of those locations, and I looked at it for a while and it was way too expensive, so I didn't end up doing it, but it looked really cool, and I was like, oh, it would be so sad to have my office on top of the bones of Rooster Teeth memories. Of course, that makes me realize I haven't even brought up Immersion, one of my favorite shows that they did. I mean, man, we're never going to be able to cover this all in 2 hours. We're going to have to do a part 2. So if you like this, and if you're still awake, please tell me you want a part 2 if you do. This could just end up being ramblings, but I know for a fact there's someone out there like me who has wanted a video like this for a long time, and I really want to make it for the 5 or 6 people of you that are hanging on right now. So we're going to keep chugging. We still have some time left. So real quick, let's talk about Immersion. Immersion was a thing that was so far ahead of its time, and I've heard that maybe Mega 64 had a video like it before, but Immersion was so cool. It was a show that I don't know how it wasn't picked up by a major network. It seemed like it was right for TV. It was the perfect, it was putting video game experiments into real life. I mean, I don't know why that didn't take off. It's going to be really annoying because a show like that, I think, was even made on Netflix, and there's probably going to be another one that gets really big eventually. But just so many fun ideas. Like, they had the one where Gus and Jeff try to hold, it's like video game inventory, and they have to keep all the inventory on their back that the guy would normally have in like a shooting game like Doom. The car immersion where they blacked out the windows of Bernie's truck and then mounted a camera behind it. So you had the third person view of driving like in GTA to see how well you could drive. Even up to the ones with Michael and Gavin where they did an immersion on the racetrack in Atlanta where they sat shotgun in the car and tried to race around the racetrack, the same racetrack in a racing video game, while being driven around the real racetrack by a professional race car driver. Crazy show, so many amazing episodes, and again, I think it was so far ahead of its time that they never got enough credit for making that show. Which, on that same note, I know Impractical Jokers existed beforehand, or at least I think it did, but Social Disorder was a show that came out with Chris and Aaron Marquis. We have a lot of shows that, and if you're listening to this, you probably had shows that you couldn't show non-Rooster Teeth fans, and you had shows and videos that you could show non-Rooster Teeth fans to get them involved. Social Disorder was pretty much always my go-to, where I would show them the episode of Social Disorder where they had to carry a body bag across from like one part of Austin down to the river. And yes, again, I know Impractical Jokers was already a thing, but this was so funny. They even had an episode where they did some sort of yoga studio, and these people on Reddit blew up on the Austin subreddit because they were so angry about this free yoga thing they signed up for, and they felt like they were pranked because they walked out before they got their release to sign. And even people in the comments were like, I think this is actually that production company in Austin. It sounds like you were just a part of like a viral video. Really great show. It must still exist on the Internet Archive, on that archive of pimps that a bunch of heroes made. I'd love to say I was a part of that. I was at first, but I was so concerned about losing the content that I actually found out I was at work. The times I've run into a Rooster Teeth fan in the wild are so few and far between, and I was sitting down with a guy in my office, and he was a new employee, and I'm talking to him, kind of getting him caught up to speed, and my boss had kind of tasked me with getting him integrated and kind of getting him out of the shell a little bit. We're talking, and he sees that I have like the Rooster Teeth podcast going or something on my phone, and he actually went to like RTX 2013. And he wasn't a huge Rooster Teeth fan, but his friends were, and we sparked this conversation, and he was there, and I asked him a whole bunch of questions because he was at the one where it got a little cringy, where the guy like put his mouth on the microphone, and it was really, really famous at the time. Again, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to dunk on anybody 12 years later, but it was a pretty rough couple years for conventions there, and maybe they all were, but the ones that there were actual video of that made it onto Reddit, people were pretty ruthless. But while we're talking, I'm talking about Rooster Teeth, super excited to have another human being in person I can talk to Rooster Teeth about. I turn back around, I'm doing my work, and then I won't say his name, but he just turns around and goes, "Oh, hey, they're shutting down." And I spun my chair around and I said, "What?" And then I look at my phone and I just start getting texts. And it was this weird moment where I felt like I was having a stroke or I was in the Matrix, where every person who knew me and who knew me well enough and was friendly enough with me to know I was into Rooster Teeth, somehow the news had gotten to them before me because I was at work, and all of them texted me within a 5-minute window of, "Oh my gosh, did you see this? Oh man, I'm so sorry." And I'm looking at my phone, these notifications coming in, and I left immediately on my lunch break. I read the article. I saw that it was closing in a couple months. I left immediately for my lunch break, There was a Best Buy. I was working in San Marcos at the time. I drove under the interstate to a Best Buy, went in, and I walked up to the guy and I said, "Where is your largest external hard drives?" And he said, "How much capacity do you want?" And I looked at my phone. I had just been paid, so my paycheck had come through, and I said, "I need the largest hard drive that you have here." And he said, "The biggest we have is a 2 terabyte hard drive here, but we can actually order one that was like a 4 or an 8 or like a 12. And I said, I don't want to order it. I need it now. I need it today. And of course, I wasn't this rude, but for the sake of the story, I was very desperate. I get the hard drive, and then I came home, and this makes me sound insane, as if this 2-hour video doesn't, but I came home and then I came onto the website. I found a tool that helped you download videos from the website, and I talked to a few other fans, and I just started downloading everything. With the Archive of Pimps, they wanted to do it where they broke up groups of videos and they assigned it to people. I wanted to be a part of that, but they were in the process of trying to decide who gets what, and it was too slow for me. So I just wanted to make sure all the stuff that I liked got preserved. So every day after work for about 2 weeks, and including weekends, I would watch, a movie with my fiance. We would hang out, we would eat lunch, eat dinner, and I would be just downloading Rooster Teeth videos in the background. Podcasts, movies, documentaries, downloading everything because I didn't want to lose it. I was that on edge. But of course, I jumped ahead about 10 years, so let's roll the clock back and talk about a show that a few of you may remember, which was Gauntlet. Gauntlet was a game show that they did that was sponsored by, I think it was like AT&T maybe. And what they would do is they had this video game competition where they had an open casting call, and a bunch of just regular people showed up. And I mean, I say regular people, I'm sure most of them were Rooster Teeth fans, and they competed in this game show for $10,000, aired the episodes, and they were broken into teams. It was a really great series. It was hosted by Allie Baker, who is a comedian now. You should follow her on Instagram. She does a lot of stand-up. Really great. And again, though, this was 12 years ago, so don't tell her that you're following her because of the Gauntlet. Just go and support what she's doing now. But it was a really cool thing, and I really loved it. It was really unique. And then they came out with Gauntlet Season 2, which was a much bigger production, and it had a bunch of big internet people, like Freddie Wong was in it. I want to say there are a bunch of famous internet people in it. But that was a really slick show, a lot of funny Joel moments in it if you're a big Joel fan. Both of those I know are on the Internet Archive, so go back and go through those. That does bring me, though, to I feel like when I look back at Rooster Teeth, my favorite year of Rooster Teeth, pre them going to the Stage 5 office, was 2013. And all of the jokes from 2013 and 2014 culminated into my favorite miniseries that they put out, which was 10 Little Roosters. I'm embarrassed about how many times I've watched 10 Little Roosters. It's a little murder mystery show that they did, where they released a poem with a contest in the first episode, and every week the people would have to guess who they think the killer was, what would happen in the next episode, how the poem all linked together. And I watched it every week, and every single week I made my guesses, and every single week I was completely wrong. Some of them were so obvious that I couldn't even believe how far off I was. I won't spoil any of them here, especially if you haven't seen it. If you were watching Rooster Teeth at this time, or even Achievement Hunter at this time only, go back and watch this. There are references to everything Rooster Teeth was doing. You're not going to miss anything if you didn't watch something that they reference. All of it is almost this Avengers Endgame of pulling together the last few years of the company and kind of pushing it into the fans and saying, hey, here's a love letter to you guys and all the things that you've supported over the past few years. But of course, if I'm going to mention 10 Little Roosters, I have to mention my other favorite show at the time, which was another one I go back and watch at least once a year, A Simple Walk into Mordor, which is simply one of the most unique ideas that they've had at the company. Apparently the idea was from Carrie and Chris. They sat down and said, what if we just walked from the set of Hobbiton from Lord of the Rings and walked to the mountain that they used for Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings? What an amazing idea. I think the story was that they told that to Bernie or Gus, and they immediately said, shut up, don't tell anyone about this idea. And they paid for it, sent them over there, they go through it, and it was this little series, and I never actually got a DVD of it. I really wanted a DVD. I'd love to have the physical media copy, but I've gone back every year and watched it. And do you want to know the crazy part? I didn't see Lord of the Rings until my fiance made me sit down and watch the extended editions, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I'm hooked, big fan now, but I had never even seen Lord of the Rings. I had seen, of course, through osmosis, they're taking the hobbits to Isengard and things like that, but I'd never seen the actual 3 movies outside of maybe when I was a kid. So I just loved this endeavor that they went through. I know a lot of you jumped off Rooster Teeth at different times over the last few years, but you may not know for the 20th anniversary, they did a bunch of throwback videos where they would do old references, and they did like a new RT short. They did a new episode of like Panics. But one of the things they did was Chris and Carrie went back with Nick, who was their guide the first time, and they went back and they did it again. They walked the entire distance again, 10 years older. When they introduced it at RTX, I was so excited. I went to the panel. They played the whole first one. They answered questions. Unfortunately, the company ended up closing after that. It looked like they were going to start a whole series called IRL Adventures. I would love to get some sort of crowdfunding thing together for them, because if they have more ideas like that, their chemistry is so great. Carrie and Chris are so much fun together, and watching them individually, I watch Carrie's streams on Twitch. Boy, I would support that immediately. I feel like now may be a good time to just broach this subject, and maybe and I know people are probably going to bring this up in the comments who don't watch the whole video or haven't got to this point yet, so if someone maybe responds with this timestamp, it'll be awesome. There are clearly in my videos people that I don't talk about and things I don't reference. I'm not a fool. I've been a fan for a long time. I have way too much of this knowledge stored. And I also know that there are things that we know publicly and there are things that we don't know. And that's not what this channel's about. That's not what I want it to be about. I want this to be a positive experience. I want this to be your safe haven away from everything else going on in the world. I want this to be a place where you can come, hang out, talk about Rooster Teeth, and maybe build back a little bit of that old internet that we had. De-shitify our little corner of the internet a little bit. So no, I'm not going to reference certain people. You know the people that I'm talking about. If you want someone to talk about them, just search their names. There's 1,000 drama channels that will serve that purpose. There are some people who I haven't mentioned yet just because either I don't know what they're doing now and I don't know if they want to be recognized publicly, which it has been slowly trickled into me that certain people are doing things publicly that I missed. I do plan on doing a video on them. As I've said, I only want to talk about people who are clearly doing things publicly and want it to be known. I'm not going to dig into people's LinkedIn or reference projects that they did 3 years ago and use that as some sort of excuse to just bring them up to drive clicks. That's not what I want. I don't want to comment on it. Again, that's not what this channel's about. I completely understand if that's what you want. Drama's real hot on YouTube. You're going to find it somewhere else. It's just not here. Okay, now that we're past that, let's talk about something fun, and let's talk about Extra Life. So Rooster Teeth's Extra Life was started by Jack and his wife, Katie. If you never got to catch an Extra Life stream, you really missed out. There's a bunch of clips on YouTube. You should totally go through them. I would even start chronologically. The video from the early years is pretty rough, but it's really worth it. There's a lot of fun stuff that happens. Of course, you can't donate now to their streams, but there's still events being put on, and I know Jack is going to do something around the time the Extra Life rolls around this year. So Extra Life is a charity event for Child's Play, which gives children in hospitals video games and entertainment to play while they go through, these horrific procedures, terrible things that no child should have to go through. I'm sure the charity does much more than that, but that's how it was introduced to me. What Rooster Teeth would do is they would take part in this as well as many groups, but Rooster Teeth would do a 24-hour live stream that would be blocked out, scheduled. There would be hosts. There would always be someone on screen. It was this crazy stream where once a year, it was like a giant party at the Rooster Teeth studios. I don't know if I saw every single year, but especially when I was in grad school in New York, I would make an event of it. I'd order food, I'd watch, and I'd try to donate what I could. It was so high energy, and even the personalities that I wasn't as familiar with, like Blaine for a little while there, they would put on these shows at like 2 or 3 in the morning. One was called Too Spooky. It was wild. They would have a wheel that they would spin whenever someone would hit a elite donation or a $1,337 donation, and they would have to do something painful or embarrassing or drink something gross. A lot of it was planned by Jack, but they had special guests. They had people come on stream, come off stream. For a lot of years there, even Matt Hullum would come on with a guitar and he would kind of sing us out at the end. I know myself and many other fans have a lot of really positive memories about Extra Life, and it's one of the things I really miss and wish they could bring back. I had a lot of times where in New York I would be feeling kind of down on myself or kind of lonely, and I'd be so thankful when that stream would roll around because I would just keep it up. I'd keep it going for the whole 24 hours. If I was cleaning or studying, it was just fun to hear them. You'd hear they'd have this alert that would go off every time that someone made one of those $1,000 donations, and I'm sure those of you that know it can hear the sound right now in your head. They used it for years. But it was such a great time, and it was such a great cause. They raised millions and millions of dollars over the years. I can't believe the support that would come out. People would donate so much money, and it was such a daunting thing, and I loved being able to share that with my fiance when she watched it for the first time, and we both actually got to donate together. You might have already seen in the footage, but we made sure to stop by the Rooster Teeth Healing Garden. This was what was partly paid for by the donations from Rooster Teeth through Extra Life at the Dell Children's Hospital, which is only about a mile from their office, and I made sure to get a little video of it. It's nighttime, we're at a hospital, but it's still public grounds. They're right by a road, so I just wanted to make sure you guys got to see it if you hadn't seen it before, what all of your contributions did. One of the things I really liked about the stream too was when they'd go outside at night. I'd love the stuff inside on camera, obviously, but when they would go outside and they would have these paintball shooting competitions, or guys would get hit by catapults or slingshots, or they'd crush something with a bulldozer. It was so cool to see those offices out in the middle of the night, midnight, 2 a.m, and just imagining when I was, thousands of miles away, that was happening somewhere in the world. It was so cool, and every time I go back there, and this was actually the first time I got to go back at night, and I just looked around, and it looked pretty much probably the same as it did back then, and it was a really cool moment that I had. Cool moment for me, and probably some of you would feel the same way, but it would be hard to explain that to someone who didn't know about it. Boy, trying to cover all of this, we are on our way down to the 636 offices where everything's going to end, so I want to try to cover what I can, but I'm not going to rush. We're going to have to cover a whole bunch of things. I didn't give Monty nearly enough time, so they're moving offices now to Stage 5, which was an old airport in Austin. They're moving to these offices, and one of the first things of note that happens is the sale to full screen. Rooster Teeth sells to full screen. They're no longer a private company. Full screen acquires them and gives them more resources to be able to keep some staff on and be able to make more projects. One of the first, I want to say, major things that happened was Monty's passing, and I want to make sure that we cover that on its own and it's given the appropriate time. But I remember when I was going to a party in college, and I knew a couple of Rooster Teeth fans in college, and we would talk about things, and I was at the party, and one of them came up to me and they said, "Hey, Monty's in the hospital." I wasn't a big RWBY guy, but I was a big Monty fan, and I said, "Well, is he all right?" And they said, "Yeah, they're thinking he's going to pull through. He had some sort of operation." And of course, ended up hearing the news later, and it was really hard. And what made it worse, even though I was a fan of him, was watching the people on the subreddit and throughout the community just really come out and show support and how sad they were about what happened. You still see people, even today, they throw Monty's name at the end of big animated projects because he was such a huge influence, and he was so worried about the time he would have to make the things that he wanted to make. It was a really somber moment. I know it was for the Rooster Teeth employees who knew him. I can't imagine what that was like to lose someone so young. And I know it was really hard for the fans too, and it really makes me sad to go back and watch any of those videos. The podcast they came out with that tributed him, the tribute video they made, but we'll cover all of that much more in depth at another time. Another thing that happened at the time that felt almost back to back with this, I don't remember what the actual timeline was, but it was followed up with Ray leaving Achievement Hunter. Ray had become one of the main staples of Achievement Hunter. What they say during the podcast, they bring him on to make a joke. I think he tells the story about taking Gavin's pizza. Bernie tells him to get back to his desk, and he says, "I feel like every minute he's away from his desk, the company loses $1 million." And it was kind of true. He was there at a time where every single quote of his felt like it got put onto a t-shirt, and not without good reason. I know that the fans were famous for just screaming out quotes from all the guys whenever they would go to a live event. Ray ended up leaving Achievement Hunter. A lot of people were upset about it. A lot of people wanted to know why. He did a very, very long stream where he looked at kind of a retrospective of all the videos he was involved in, and he addressed a lot of the concerns that he had and why he left and his mentality there. You should just go watch that. I don't want to take the words out of his mouth. He does a great job explaining it, and I think it's some closure that a lot of fans at the time maybe didn't get and you could have now. So many things were going on at the company at this point, it's really hard to pinpoint what to talk about, and especially how to tell, the story or the history of Rooster Teeth. You would have to balloon out so much and cover so many different angles. It felt like the company was doing so many different things that it was impossible to keep up with it all. Between shows like Camp, Nomad from Nowhere, even Bernie's vlog, they started Always Open, the On the Spot show with John Reisinger. There were so many things going on. I remember at the time just kind of having to take a break. I went down to only watching the podcast for probably a year or so because it was just too much to take in, and I always felt like I was missing something if I watched one show and they would reference something that happened on another show. So with the little bit of time I have left, I'm not going to try to cram the last 10 years of Rooster Teeth into, a 10-minute clip. So I'll talk about some of the things that were really exciting, and we're definitely going to have to do another one of these where we kind of flesh out some things that I missed. But one of the biggest shows at the time was Achievement Hunter, where they would go and do basically a ghost hunting show. It was based around the fact that Jeff had a paranormal experience when he was a kid. He didn't really consider himself a huge believer in ghosts, but he definitely believed in that experience he had. They would go to these haunted locations, they'd tell the story, and then they would try to induce some sort of ghost activity. The problem with the show was they tried to do it completely real. And I say it's a problem. I actually really appreciated it. The show was funny. I think most people who watched it enjoyed it. But the problem was they weren't going to fake anything. They would just go and they were trying to record and they were genuinely trying to catch ghosts on film. Now, before people come for me and say that I'm not a believer or that I'm just being dismissive, I have been on more ghost tours than any human being should ever have to go on in their life. I've always been fascinated with ghost tours. I grew up in Louisiana and Georgia. I went to a ton of ghost tours in the Myrtles Plantation in Louisiana, the Haunted Lighthouse in St. Augustine. I've been to so many ghost tours in St. Augustine and Savannah, Georgia, New York City, all of them. And as much as I'm a big fan and I've always really wanted to find some sort of paranormal activity, I never have. And all the ghost hunting shows, while I found them fascinating, I could tell that they were just faking everything, especially the more you look into the editing of it. They didn't fake it, and that's why I think the show didn't blow up. And it's actually kind of a funny commentary on ghost shows in general. But that was a great show. This was also around the time where they launched Theater Mode. I wasn't someone who watched a whole lot of Theater Mode, but my best friend was a huge fan of Theater Mode, where they'd sit down, and the guys at Achievement Hunter and then even Funhouse did it too. They'd watch a whole movie and they would just give their commentary over it. Hilarious stuff. They also started Let's Play Live. Let's Play Live was something that blew my mind, and yet another example of them being so forward thinking. They created a live show based around a Let's Play, which still I don't think has really been matched to this day. You could argue that streaming is that, but it's really not. Live, in person, they're using all of these bits. I never actually got to go. I was too worried. There was a time there where I was worried about going and worried about being in this large group of fans that's all just yelling Mark Nutt at Gavin. But of course, it wasn't really like that, or maybe it was. I don't know. If you went to one of those, please tell me in the comments. But if you didn't get to go, you can do what I did. And one of the amazing documentaries that they made, and they made several, Let's Play Live documentary where they documented how they started the show and what it was like to put that on. Much more technical than I think a lot of their stuff ends up being, but you should totally watch it just to get an idea of, okay, this is Jeff and them in performance mode, and here's Jeff and them in work mode. And there was a real big difference, and it was really fascinating to see that. But that now leads me into the Rooster Teeth documentaries, or the RT docs that they made. These are way too slept on. Nobody watches these, and if you have, you've tried to recommend it to other Rooster Teeth fans, and they kind of just give you a hand wave, or they say they're going to add it to their list. Almost all of them are really solid. I've already talked about the 15 years one. I've watched that one several times. I actually have it downloaded on a USB stick with a bunch of other content that I keep in my car, because my car has a little screen that will play videos when the car is not moving. So I'll watch the Rooster Teeth documentary sometimes before work, and I do watch other things, just so you know. I watch movies, I watch TV shows, I watch sports. It's not just Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth just takes up probably 60% of it. But so many cool documentaries. Another one that they did was they did The Unconventional, which I think is my favorite, where Gus goes to 3 different conventions. What I love about the documentaries is they focus on a concept and expand on a concept that I really find fascinating. And for example, the Unconventional one, he focuses on the aspect of conventions, like RTX, like Comic-Con, and the draw that these communities have, and why people go so crazy for them, and what the allure is. He goes to 3 conventions. He goes to SantaCon in New York City, which I'll tell you right now is not a real convention, but he gets into it in the documentary. He goes to a FurryCon, where it's a bunch of people who dress up as furries, and he goes to an Abraham Lincoln Presenters Convention. 3 wildly different conventions that take Gus clearly so far outside of his comfort zone. Wow, the way he nails the subject material and really portrays these people as not in a way of making fun of them, because it would have been really easy to do it in a way where he would be poking fun at these people, but he doesn't. He really comes at it from an earnest point of view. I can't talk about Gus in these documentaries without talking about Common Ground, the documentary about immigration into the United States from Mexico. Gus grew up, like we talked about, in Eagle Pass, a border town, and it's another amazing, very powerful documentary. So many other great ones. There's a tech one where Barbara and Blaine aren't allowed to use their phones or any technology for a period of time. There's one where Jeff becomes a tattoo artist. There's one where Jeff becomes a stand-up comedian for a while. There's another great one called House of Pain, where James Willems and Lawrence Sontag from Funhouse become professional wrestlers, and the training and what goes into that. Most people's favorite documentary is the head massage documentary, where Bernie and Gavin go to the Indian head massage doctor who pulls down energy from the sky and puts them into your head, which is kind of a documentary about ASMR, but really about their trip to India. Really fascinating. You'll get a whole lot out of it. Unfortunately, the guy in the documentary is passed, but you can find videos of him on the internet. I guess one of the last things I'll talk about is Bernie's vlog. Bernie's vlog was something that he did for about a year. I think it was sponsor only, and then it switched to being available to everybody. But it was these collection of vlogs he did over a time where he was living in LA partly and in Austin, and they're really uplifting, they're really inspiring. There are a lot of people with a lot of opinions about Bernie that I've seen in my comments, mostly positive, but I'm a big fan of Bernie. I always have been. I've been a big fan of everyone at Rooster Teeth, obviously, but especially Bernie. I really appreciate his outlook on community and how much it means to be a good content creator and be good to the people that watch what you do. And boy, just in the last 2 weeks, I've really felt that. And watching his vlogs, there's some great ones where he talks about, the power of saying yes and how you should say yes to things and be open to more experiences, but even all the way down to his vlogs where one, he's getting his Tesla wrapped, and another one he's doing a food tour with a bunch of people, and it kind of feeds back into that RT Life vibe of we perceive the company and how it just looks like it's so much fun to work there. But these past 2 weeks, the support from you guys has been so crazy. I don't even know how to wrap my head around it. I've wanted to make these videos for 10 years, and I don't know what stopped me. You guys have really enjoyed them. You've said that all sorts of things, like some people are just on the TikTok, some people watch my shorts, some people comment on Reddit, some people comment on the videos themselves. Everyone clearly has fond memories of this, and for whatever negative reasons that pulled you away, I really want anyone who watches me to feel like this is a spot where they can come and not just reminisce. We don't just want to bank on nostalgia. We could talk about new stuff. New stuff is on the horizon, and that's what I plan to do. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed kind of talking about the past with me for the last couple hours, but I want to do more than that. And of course, we're going to make more videos talking about the past because, man, I know I'm going to sit down and listen to the first 200 Drunk Tanks again. I know I'm going to sit through all of the RT shorts on a drunk Saturday night. I know what's going to happen. But there's a lot of stuff to be excited about too. And I'm making this also because I know there are people out there that feel like they don't have anyone that they can talk to about this stuff. Things happen, and to you, it's such a huge deal. That's why I talked about RTX and what it was like for me at RTX. It's such a huge moment for you, and you look around and you're trying to share it with someone and there's no one to share it with. And that's why I really don't like Twitch the way it is and the way Twitch streaming works. It feels like it's a lot of people yelling into their own megaphone in a chat, and maybe the person picks out one of those comments and says what it is. And that's why I can tell you right now, I would love to stream just to talk more about this with you guys. If we stream, we're not doing donations, we're not doing tips. If you want to subscribe or gift subscribers, that would be the only way to support, because I want to harvest a community where it feels like a real community. It's not harvesting because this is Rooster Teeth's community. We all are Rooster Teeth's community. That's how we got here, but I want to make a spot where we can really talk amongst each other and be the way the old internet was. That's why I don't want to do donations. I don't want to do tips. I don't want to shout out certain comments. I just want to talk. I want everyone to feel like it's an open conversation. I try really hard not to censor any of the comments. And yeah, of course, like I said, I don't talk about certain things. I don't talk about certain controversies. But again, that's because we're staying positive. I'm also not going to stop people from talking about certain things in the comments or certain people unless you cross a line. And I'll tell you right now, the line's arbitrary. I like to think it's a fairly liberal line, and I let you get away with a little bit extra, but the moment we start breaching into hate speech or something awful, look, I'm gonna remove the comment. And if you disagree with why I removed the comment, find me on Reddit, find me on Discord. I'm not famous. I'll respond. I enjoy the discussion. I've had several discussions already with people. And, you know, I'm not going to change anybody's mind, but I would appreciate if you looked at my outlook on some of this, and I would love to look at yours. I've had a lot of opinions, both good and bad, in my whole life, and especially about Rooster Teeth over the last 10 years. I wanted to share some of them with you here. Let's talk. Maybe you have bad opinions. Maybe you have good opinions, and I just don't really see them. And I just really haven't thought about it from your angle. Let's talk. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a community. If anyone is still listening now and not asleep or have clicked off the video, let's do this the right way. I would really like to keep making videos for you guys. Maybe this video is going to flop and no one's going to watch it. This is a video that I wrote out probably 10 years ago that, man, I wish somebody at Rooster Teeth would sit down and they would get in their car and they'd drive around Austin and they'd tell stories and they'd talk about the shows and they'd show clips from the shows. And I've just been thinking about that for years. And finally, I woke up the other day. You guys had been so supportive, so positive. I had made the Rooster Teeth office tour video that was like 10 minutes. And I just said, why don't I just do it? And clearly this isn't a ploy to make money. I'm not, like I've said, I don't consider myself a content creator. I'm not here to make money. I have a regular job. I look at it though and I go, well, you know, these people like it. And the people who would like this video that I'm putting out now, the people who are listening to me talk at this point in the video, you're the reason I made it. You're like me. I want you to feel like there's someone else like you out there, because I went for a long time thinking there wasn't anyone like me out there. Sometimes I still think that, but it's just not true. You know, there's community everywhere. There's community in common interests. So yeah, if that's something that excites you, if that's something that amps you up, let's keep talking. You know, I want to do my first stream next weekend. I would love to stream on Twitch and YouTube. And again, we're going to have certain rules. It's going to be a little different than any other Twitch stream you've seen. And I'm not going to say it's unique. I'm sure someone else has come up with the ideas that I've come up with. But I'm someone who doesn't watch a lot of Twitch. I don't like the way that it works. I don't like the ecosystem. So I'm going to try to stream Twitch the way I want to stream it. And I'm going to have a couple friends who are moderating who are really big into Twitch. And I've had to talk to them a few times to say, hey, look, this is, I'm not going to run it like a normal Twitch stream. If you want to come around, talk about Rooster Teeth, let's do it. And I just want to end on this note that Rooster Teeth means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I don't want to discount any of your opinions, but we're at a time when, but this is the cliche, we're at a time when we're so divided and there's a lot of problems in the world. Let's just not deal with that. Bernie wants to relaunch Rooster Teeth, and the reason he's doing it, aside from keeping the content alive and making some new stuff, he wants to do it because he talks about the shitification of the internet and really everything in general. We've watched AI content, AI voiceovers. This whole video could have been an AI voiceover with AI machine that wrote out all of these experiences and just looked at Wikipedia, but I'm glad it wasn't, and I hope you're glad that it wasn't. The internet and everything, the shitification has taken over, and Bernie started Rooster Teeth again to de-shitificate our corner of the internet, and that was so inspiring to me that I wanted to also sit down and say, hey, look, after I had these first couple of videos that did pretty well, I want to sit down and I want to help de-shitify our corner. And if this is how we do it, if we just have to be positive about Rooster Teeth content, get excited about what's coming in the future, while also reminiscing and enjoying what we had in the past, I'm here for it, and I hope you are too. So I really, really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you're still here, God, I hope you enjoyed it if you're still here. If you're hate listening, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you a Patreon subscription to somebody or something, or a Twitch subscription, because I appreciate you sitting through 2 hours, but thank you so much for everything you've done and all the support you guys have given me. I really want to keep making good videos for you. I already have the next 2 video ideas ready to go, locked and loaded, so please let me know. If you want to reach out, talk to me. I'm here. Discord, Reddit, YouTube, I'm around. Look for me, you'll find me, and let's chat. But remember, if you do want to reach out to anybody from Rooster Teeth or talk to them or show them this video, remember, let's be positive, not parasocial. Let's keep it between us. I'll talk to you soon. I post shorts every single day. Drop comments in those. I always see those comments pop up first. I try to intermix it with a merch video and then a little compilation. I try to make my compilations a little different, where I'm not just dropping an entire clip of something. I'm just dropping a few quotes or a few little quick moments that all mean something to me. Who knows how long I can keep that going, but I'll keep it going for as long as people watch it and seem to enjoy it, just like I will with these videos. So I can't wait to make another one for you. Please let me know if you liked it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.